Ms. Owens to be here to talk to us a little bit about this campaign season and how we should be addressing things that come our way. And I thought it would probably be best to handle this right as we began our meeting. And I've had several conversations back and forth, so with one or two of you about it. So I've asked Ms. Owens to address us.
Hi. I will start by telling you that if I were locked in my office with no access to news or any other knowledge, I would know this is election season, because we've had a city client to call and they're wrestling with some employees who are engaging in political activities. And more direct to this, not to you all specifically, but more direct to boards of education, I had a superintendent call me the other day and said, we have a teacher who has a relative running for public office. I said, no problem, until he said, and she's rewarding her students for wearing her relative's political campaign paraphernalia. I said, oops, which is a violation of state law and their board policies. So he had to deal with that. But anyway, so this, getting the call to talk a little bit about, you know, the election season and how it affects public schools isn't really surprising to me, to be perfectly honest. I was specifically asked to talk about the Little Hatch Act, modeled on the Federal Hatch Act. I want to start by saying, like a lot of things in law, there's a general statute, and then you start piling in all the exceptions. There is a general statute that says that every local government employee has the same right as any other citizen to be a candidate for public office or to vote his or her conscience and those kinds of things. There's also a specific statute that says employees have the right to speak to elected officials, because in the past some employees were punished if they went to a board member and, you know, tried to talk about their job. So there are those kinds of general statutes out there, but specifically the Little Hatch Act puts restrictions on all kinds of public officials and public employees with respect to political activity. I'm going to talk first about employees, okay? The statute uses the term teacher, but listen, I'm going to read it. This is the definition of teacher in the Little Hatch Act. It means any person employed in a public school system as a teacher, a helping teacher, a teacher's aide, a librarian, a principal, a supervisor, a director of schools, or a member of the administrative staff. So basically, everybody in the district except you all, okay? So when I say teacher under this law, it's very, very broad, okay? There's some things that are not going to surprise you. By the way, these laws, these types of laws have been upheld as constitutional across the country as a legitimate restriction on political activity by people simply because their freedom of speech and those other kinds of rights that we all enjoy, simply because it's promoting a legitimate government interest. And as I go through these things, which I think most of you are aware of, and by the way, I'm going to get to board members, so hold your seats. The teachers, they can't do anything in their official positions to interfere with an election, period, to interfere with any nomination for office, to encourage, coerce, intimidate anyone to vote a particular way. I mean, you know, duh, right? Yeah. Or to receive or pay any kind of money, and it doesn't have to be money per se, to gain some kind of political purpose, okay? And they cannot solicit contributions for any kind of political activity, solicit contributions from anybody who's going to benefit from public money. That's whether that's an employee, whether that's a contractor, whether anybody who's going to benefit from public money. They can't solicit political contributions from those people. They also cannot solicit contributions for people whom they supervise. So the director can't solicit political contributions from anybody in the district because he supervises everyone in the district. So cannot promise any kind of a benefit to give them a job, to give them a contract, to give them a grant, a loan, or whatever, to any kind of a benefit, or threaten to take away a benefit, fire somebody, take away a contract, or not reward a contract for any kind of political activity or position. And then the Little Hatch Act, that's what I'm focusing on right now, the Little Hatch Act. Teachers, very specifically in the statute, are prohibited from displaying campaign literature, banners, placards, streamers, any of those kinds of things on school property, period. Except, I tell you, you get the general rule and you get all the exceptions. I was a government teacher, and every time we had a presidential election, and sometimes other elections, but usually presidential elections, my government classes ran mock elections. And for those purposes, that was a legitimate educational purpose. And we could put up signs for that, even though it promoted one party or the other party. Trust me, we had signs for all parties and all people. There's another exception when teachers are off duty. When they're off duty, they have the right to exercise. They can't use district equipment or property in any way to do it, but certainly off duty, that goes to their right to, to exercise their political opinions as other citizens do. There is another exception that they can, on their personal vehicles, have a bumper sticker or decal on the car on district property. That's an exception in the Hatch Act. The other things that are prohibited for employees, or it says teacher, but that's defined very, very broadly. They cannot actively engage in a political campaign on or behalf of any party, any person, any organization, period. They can't engage in campaign activities, in campaign for partisan purposes. All of this in the statute. They cannot attend while on duty, during duty hours is what it actually says. So during the school day or during other times when they're expected to be on duty, they cannot attend political campaign rallies or any other types of meetings that are political in nature. They cannot use their influence to impact any kind of election, whether it's a primary, a general election, conducted anywhere in the state of Tennessee, not just here in Germantown. And they cannot perform any kind of political campaign duties or functions. That's during their duty hours. They can, of course, and this is repeated in the statute, vote for anybody they want to, and they're allowed to express their personal opinions, but they have to, by statute and by your board policy, of course, they have to make it clear that it's their personal opinion and not the opinion of this district when they do that. Violation of any of that is a Class C misdemeanor. The teacher in this district that I told you about a few minutes ago was a little bit surprised when she found out she could she was actually committing a crime on behalf of her relative. The Little Hatch Act, for most of what I just told you, does not apply to elected officials. That's what you all are. But part of the Little Hatch Act specifically does apply to you as board members, okay? Specifically, you may not interfere in an election or a nomination for office. You may not interfere in an election or a nomination, and that is using your official position to do that. Now, obviously, you still have the right as a citizen. When you make it clear you're acting as a citizen, you still have the right to do that. But when you're in your official position, you cannot interfere with an election or with a nomination. You cannot try to intimidate, coerce, encourage, or whatever, a person to vote a particular way, whether that's for a person, a candidate, for a ballot measure of some sort, any kind of position, you cannot do that. And you may not knowingly receive payments or make payments to those people who are in this district or any other public employee, I guess, for purposes of political activity. That part of the Hatch Act does apply to elected officials. Okay? So, violation of any of that is a Class C misdemeanor as well. Now that is the Little Hatch Act. All of that you have sort of adopted into three main policies in your district. Okay, 1.806 talking about advertising and distribution of materials in schools. It says that no part of the school system, not the facilities, the name, the staff, the students, shall be used for advertising or promoting the interest of any political agency or organization. That's in that policy. That policy also says political literature shall not be distributed through the schools to students, nor sent home to parents, nor placed in teachers' mailboxes, lounges, or on school premises anywhere. And then political signs for people who are running for public office will not be allowed on school property except those being held by poll workers on election day, because a lot of schools are used for polling places. That same policy also says no school or community organization, employee, student, or other person may use the name of the school system or an individual school in any promotional manner or for personal benefit without prior approval of this board. And that doesn't use the word partisan, but certainly that's with respect to politics as well. Under 1.1061, the Boardsmanship Code of Ethics, it says, speaking as a board member, I will represent at all times the entire school community and refuse to represent special interest or partisan politics. And then you will avoid conflicts of interest and will refrain from using your position on the board for partisan gain, which that's the little Hatch Act in essence. Also, employees under 5.611, I apologize, the title is ethics, but it's in the employee section of your policy manual. It says, and I'm abbreviating here, employees must restrain from using school contacts or privileges to promote partisan politics, which again, that's a very mild version of the little Hatch Act. There is a TSBA base policy that this board has not adopted that has a little bit more language. I don't know if y'all have problems that you need to think about looking at that. That is 5.606. It's a TSBA base. I'm not recommending, I'm just saying that there is more language in that TSBA base policy about political activity in the school district, if you're interested in looking at that.
What was that again?
5.606. And again, whether you adopt it or not is certainly your choice. I'm just making you aware that there is more language in another policy if you choose to look at it.
Is there anything in nature that's in that policy that you haven't already talked about, or is it just
No,
more
it
language?
repeats. It's just a little bit, adds a little bit of clarity. I
Okay.
mean, I had to look through your policies and pick out little bits and pieces, but,
Right.
but that's very specific. And it does not contradict or add to anything that I've said.
Sure.
It's just, but it's a little bit more specific. But again, I'm not recommending it, I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying that that's an option if you think you need more protection.
I think the conversation came about because as we enter election season, oftentimes our names get used in a variety of ways. You can support anyone you want as an individual, but you cannot be referred to or use the fact that you're a school board member. So it can't be Betsy Landers, school board member, or school board member Betsy Landers. But as an individual, you have a right to do whomever. So,
Let me give you an example that I found enlightening. And this is out with respect to the Federal Hatch Act, which for the most part doesn't apply here, but a little bit. Don't worry about that. There's an example that is used in the Federal Hatch Act that says, in the FAQs, I think, that says, if that does apply to you, and you want to have a campaign fundraising event in your home, you can allow the party or the sponsoring group to use your home, but it can't say at the home of. You have to be there as a guest. You can't host it, even though it's your own house. And that's kind of the extent to which you have to very carefully draw the line between personal participation, which is your right, and anything that makes it look like, that you're doing this as a board member. Or in the case of the employees of the district or the director or anybody else.
any questions? Okay. Just thought you would all appreciate just getting a little bit more information as we go into the political season.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owens, very much.
We will see you later.
I'll see you in a little bit.
All right, next order of business is the tenure recommendation. Mr. Haddow.
There had been good afternoon, everyone. couple adjustments to the tenure. You have a list on your page there of 3 names that were excluded from the tenure list. So we want to catch that before the year's over. And those 3 people are Phoebe Earhart, Rochelle Okada, and Monica Thomas. Process, if you're trying to figure out process, we did send something out to the principals in November to look at the list, the preliminary list of names to share with their staff of, hey, double check this, have conversations with your staff to make sure we did not leave anyone off the list. I think what probably happened, and I'm thinking here, is the tyranny of the urgency caught 2 of these people. One was an oversight on our part. So we're trying to make sure that these people are honored and recognized with the tenure status.
So we have asked them to come tonight, but told them that they're not official until y'all vote for them this evening.
Any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haddow. Policy review, no, is that text? Yeah. Policy review, first reading.
I'll just come up here and set up shop because I think I've got the next 6 or
think you're
7
right,
items on the
yeah.
agenda, so.
I think you do.
I just had one policy revision recommendation, and this is really, we're already practicing this way. It's our procedure now, and it's what state law requires now, but we updated policy 3.202, which is our emergency preparedness plan, and really the change there is in the drills that are required. What's new this year, we've always been required to do 11 fire drills, always 2 within the first 30 days. What's new there is the 4 fire safety educational announcements that we're required to do throughout the year. Also new there is, as of this year, we used to just get 3 additional safety drills where we had choice in the matter. Now 2 of those have been specifically mandated to be earthquake safety drills since we're on the New Madrid fault line. So we're down to now the 3 additional drills. 2 have to be earthquake, 1 can be choice. And then we still have our armed intruder drill. There was language added to where that's done in coordination with local law enforcement. And those are the major changes to this policy.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'm sorry, just jumping right in.
Ms. Ove?
On the armed intruder drill, it says that each school safety team will conduct that. Is that, does that include the children or does not include the children?
Everybody plays a role and a part in
Everybody?
that, so.
Okay, because I know it says the flexible drill can be inclement weather, an additional earthquake, or an armed intruder, or other emergency drill. So this is in addition to that 3rd flexible drill.
Correct, yes. One
Okay.
has to be armed intruder each year.
Right, okay.
So so you have the 3 additional safety drills, and for us, that's gonna be 2.
2 have to be earthquake.
Right, and so is this armed intruder, this one of those 3, or is it?
No,
an
ma'am, it's
okay.
additional.
Okay, so it could be.
So
okay.
you could do 2 armed
Okay.
intruder drills per
Okay.
year
And is that per school, or is that something that y'all dictate as to what that other one would be based on?
We leave that up to school
Okay,
choice historically.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Does the district, because I know, we have levels of emergency, right? Do y'all as a district office also drill some of the plans that you have, should there be, I don't know, a
We-
zombie apocalypse or
We will,
whatever it
and we
is?
do, and we will,
Okay.
but that's not part of the drill policy. It's not
Okay.
required
Okay,
by
I
law
didn't know
we
if
do
that would be, that is not covered in here, but it is something that you
It's a
do.
procedure that we do, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
What schools have AEDs?
Everyone.
All?
They all do, so they all do this drill.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think most of them have been donated, majority by Kiwanis.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions, we'll move on to the transportation RFP.
Okay, to go through a little background on where we have been and where we are with transportation. When we were beginning the district, we piggybacked off of Shelby County Schools RFP, which ended up being Durham as the reward. We've been with Durham for 4 years. This is our 4th year of the contract that we're currently in. I would say that remembering back on some of the wonderful memories that I had year 1, it was a very rocky start.
Yeah.
Durham had to bring in drivers from out of state in order to fill routes for the first few months. We had 4 months where we didn't even see an invoice, and then when we got them, they were a mess. Year one was tough, and year one's tough for a lot of businesses and startups. If you would have asked me year one or year two if I would have ever recommended Durham, the answer would have been probably not, based on our experience with them. Year three and year four, we did see improvement, and this has been their best year to date. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. Do they still make mistakes? Yes, they still make mistakes, and plenty of them. But by and large, this year, the complaints would be, I'd say, within the parameters that you would expect to have if you were running it yourself, within the range that you would expect in the day-to-day transportation world. We've worked with them the past 7 months to get that bus tracker up and operational. They are, as a part of this RFP, raising their driver pay to $14 an hour, which is definitely a good step in the right direction to retain quality drivers. So that's a little bit on the history with them. We put this out to RFP. We did receive 2 responses from Durham and from First Student. The lowest response that we had was from Durham. It was actually bid alternate number 2, which is they can have the buses in our fleet for a maximum of 12 years, and then after that they have to age it out. They can't use the bus anymore.
Okay, so that's what that means, is the age. I had that question.
Yes, ma'am.
7 versus the 12, okay.
Yes, so if we were to go with the 7-year option, the maximum age of our life of the bus could be 7 years before they would have to replace the bus. That is the recommendation that we're going to be making tonight. On the spreadsheet, the key highlights that I wanted to hit, even for the 12-year option, we're seeing an 8% contract increase year one, which adds up to about $83,700, and then 4% increases year 2 and year 3 in that contract. So that's a 3-year contract where we're seeing an increase over 3 years of $194,000. And that's for the Durham 12-year option. First Student's response on just the base bid had a 40% jump of $438,000 year 1, and then incremental 2.5% increases year 2 and year 3. The total increase over 3 years was $520,706. And then First Student did put in a bid alternate for Type C buses. And I put that in the spreadsheet as well for you to see that as a different result there. The first year there was a 23% increase, and that added up to roughly $230,000, $229,782 to be exact. And then there were 2.5% increases year 2 and year 3, with a total 3-year increase of $301,290. There were a lot of concerns that were brought up about the Type C bus, and one of the reasons we spec Type D versus Type C buses. One of the concerns that came up, the Type C bus has the engine in the front, or a front load engine, whereas the Type D bus has a rear engine. There were some grizzled veterans on the RFP vetting committee that talked about some nightmare situations that they had with those Type C buses from a safety perspective. So the D is considered safer generally from fires in the engine compartment based on placement, and easier for all to exit the bus should there be that type of event. There were also some safety concerns that were brought up on the turning radius. The D is generally considered to have a better turning radius. And then driver visibility was also brought up as a bonus to the Type D versus Type C bus. So I just wanted to give the board some of the reasons and discussions. So we didn't recommend that, even though it would have come with new Type C buses from First Student. That was part of their proposal. But it would have come with an over $100,000 budget impact over 3 years. And the general consensus was not favoring the Type C bus versus Type D bus. So our recommendation that we're bringing is to stick with Durham. It would be a 3-year contract for their bid alternate number 2, which would allow them to keep the buses in the fleet for 12 years. And at that point, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do we
Questions?
currently have Type D buses?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
We
so
do.
so that would not be a change?
It would be consistent.
It would be
Okay.
consistent with what we
Okay.
currently have.
And this is the same number of buses, the same routes, basically everything would stay the same?
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
and it's a cost per day when you look at the
Right.
way it's priced. So it's,
Okay.
as we grow and as we develop as a
Then
district.
that'll
you
be
know.
a additional incremental.
Mhm.
That would be the only variable looking forward as we plan out the new elementary school. I know we haven't picked names or start times or anything of that nature yet, but once we add those buses, of course, that will have a cost impact that comes along with it as well.
And that was one of my questions, is so this contract, the way that it will be written, will cover those
It's a unit price.
incremental?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, they'll run buses as we ask them to, but they're gonna charge us on that
Right.
daily rate.
Right. Is there anything about their current operation that you would change? I mean, is there anything that you could alter in the contract potentially that would give you more comfort or more flexibility?
A couple of things that we discussed, the first one obviously is getting the penalty out of the contract, which going out to RFP accomplishes that. The other things that we discussed as far as the structuring of the contract, we talked about less of time for them to mess up, for lack of a better term. Currently in the current contract, they get 2 months where they can run as late is without any type of punitive damages or penalties. So that'll be one of the things that we bring up is you gotta have skin in the game for performance. 2 months, I can understand the first few weeks, it is very hectic, routes are different, ridership is sporadic, but after 1 month, things should start to settle into a flow, and we shouldn't see buses run later than an hour or things like that. So that was definitely one of the things that we want to see different in the current contract.
Okay. And the shared services document that's in here, what is that?
Let's see. Okay, that was the actual RFP that went out.
Okay.
So this RFP, we decided to do it in cooperation with the other municipalities in order to get the benefit of the joint pricing. But that document, that's actually the RFP that went out to anybody and everybody who was interested in bidding the project.
And so does that have any impact on the contract we signed with Durham? Is it contingent on any of the other districts signing?
My understanding is every municipality is getting their own
Okay,
contract for
okay,
this.
Okay. And the RFP mentioned a 4-year contract, but we're going 3 years?
This is a 3-year
Okay,
contract.
okay.
It is a 3-year contract, and
Okay.
that should be the language within the RFP. That's what's called for, is a 3-year contract. And the responses that we got back were for 3-year contracts.
Okay.
Any other questions? Next, maintenance contract extension. Mr. Cathy.
So go back in time again, when we started the district, one of the things that we went through was how we were going to handle maintenance. Shelby County Schools and Memphis City Schools had just merged, and they laid off a ton of skilled labor when that happened. We were fortunate enough to be able to do this arrangement with GCA, where they picked up a lot of those tradesmen and skilled laborers who are currently still on our GCA maintenance staff. Since the district's inception, we've had over 8,400 work orders, and we're in our 4th year right now. So when we think about the things that it takes just to make the wheels on the bus go round and round on a daily basis, people walk in and they take for granted that the lights are going to turn on, the toilets are going to flush, and the heat is going to work, or the air conditioning is going to work. And there are a whole lot of things that go into just opening and closing the doors on a daily basis. The maintenance staff that we have are legacy Shelby County Schools workers who really take pride in our schools and have a good knowledge base of our schools. And so this is a contract that has been working. We have electrical, plumbing, HVAC, carpentry, and locksmithing as part of that contract. And we are currently in year 3 of this contract, and the way the contract is currently worded is very similar to our other ones. They're 1-year contracts with the option to renew for 1 additional year, and that's what we're requesting to do. There was a contract negotiation, and this does have a 5% increase in this contract. On their side, that was really partially due to they say they were losing money on this account, and they provided some pretty good evidence to show that was indeed the case. Now, this is not where they started with the 5% increase, but it's where we landed. So, and the reason that ABM is on the letter that's attached is because ABM bought GCA out, and so they are one big happy, unhappy family now. So that is our recommendation, is to extend this contract for another year.
Is there a reason we just extended 1 year? There was no benefit to going longer with the 5-year or 5% increase, or are they unwilling to
Our historic boards, and historically on those side, everybody likes to keep their options open. The school boards included have historically liked to said 1 year, because if things start going south, you don't, the longer obligation generally has not been favored.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, moving right along, the bid award for Houston High School's painting.
I'll start
Are you
off with.
waiting for your?
There you go.
Oh, yes, Ms. Crowder's gonna have some pictures that kind of go on loop there on some of our, not so proud, painting
Sure.
needs at Houston High School that'll just kind of loop there. But these are just some of the examples of what we have at Houston High School. It's definitely, I would say it's a need, and most folks look at painting as maintenance, not even a capital improvement project, but it's just maintenance that you have to do for a building.
Sure.
And our goal in operations and doing research and talking to lots of different folks is really to paint a school or a building every 7 years. That's about where you need to be in order to maintain the schools properly. We're getting to a point, hopefully by next year, where we will have 7 buildings in total. So the goal would be at that point, just on a long-term planning basis, we're painting a building a year, and that will keep us where we need to be from a painting standpoint.
So that we never get to this point.
So that we never get to this
Right.
point.
Mhm.
The records that Shelby County Schools handed over to us for Houston High School, the last time that they painted, according to all the records they handed over, was 2005. So that school's going on 13 years of not being painted, and this is what you get when you don't paint for that long. Couple of things that just go over as part of this, the bid. I'd hit the 2005. There are other items in this bid package, and I want to talk about those to be completely transparent. The lockers are a part of this bid
That
package.
was my question.
There are currently 2,650 lockers at Houston High School. Now, how we got there is at one point before Southwind High School opened, there were 2,500 plus kids attending that school. But now that is way too rich of a locker
Sure.
count than what we need. Another reason that we really started looking at lockers, as we're doing our safety walks and we're realizing that the goal eventually is to enclose the main building and the A building, that's going to mean that every child's going to have to pass between buildings for classes. A lot of students transition outside to get to classes. They transition out behind the building, they transition in front of the building. Looking at safety, one of the tasks that Mr. Manuel charged me with is finding out a way, similar to what we did with Riverdale's courtyard, to enclose that main building and A building to the point where you can pass safely there. Well, what that will mean is that kids are no longer transitioning outside for classes. Well, human traffic jams up now when we do let kids go outside and walk back and forth between classes. So when we started looking at the lockers, in addition that we had too many and there are a lot that are in disrepair, it will add some space to the width of the halls to allow for students to pass. And if we're forcing them all inside now, it's just going to create a bigger traffic cluster inside the building. So that was another consideration that we looked at. The project is calling for the removal of about 1,500 lockers, which would leave the school with 1,150. Now that gave me some pause at first because we have more students at that school than that locker count is. But then we sat down with Mr. Legault over at the high school. He's the administrator that does all the lockers there. And the counts just continue to decline on the number of students that are actually renting lockers. This year it's 855. And so we're leaving almost 300 lockers more than that. If we ever got, some of those need to be replaced anyway, but if we ever got to the point where we needed to do that, we could look at that. We think this is good enough and it's going to open the campus up. And if you're going to paint, now's the time to get the lockers out of there because there's a whole world behind those lockers
Sure.
and under those lockers. And that's why also in this bid package, there was cove base replacement, flooring repair allowance, and when those lockers come up, the floor usually comes up with them, and the cove base and everything else around it. So all that being said, I just wanted the board to be aware that this isn't a painting project, but those are additional things in this project. for the Master Facilities Planning Committee, when they prioritized this list back in October, I think it was second after Farmington's HVAC units, past buildings. Now, buildings were up at the top of the list, but then after that, the Facility Committee put this second on the list after Farmington's HVAC units. Once that happened in October, we went ahead and started planning for bid packages and looking at budget and what we could accomplish there. And the board just recently revisited this conversation, and it came, I think, fourth when looking at how all the board members put their priorities in. So this came in over the budget number, significantly over the budget number that we have in our facilities plan. I think there's some good reasons for that it's over the $400,000 that it's in our master facilities plan. One of the good reasons is we added some scope of work to the project with the locker removal. We've also already been in contact with we only had one response to the bid. Everybody else bailed out because of the timeline. And Savage Brothers is willing to meet the timeline, but they're already saying, look, we need nights, we need weekends. We're going to have to really push to get this done in 7 weeks. We're talking about painting 263,000 square feet, and that's a mammoth task in a short time frame. So you also are probably seeing some dollars added in on their side on the labor for overtime, weekends, et cetera. All that being said, that is going to be our recommendation to award it to the one respondent, which was Savage Brothers, in the amount of $706,000. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions?
Do we have references of this company? I mean, have we seen any of their work or heard of any of their work and feel good about it?
Yes, ma'am. In addition to conversations, I visited their website and looked at some of the projects that they've done, and this is definitely within their capabilities to handle a project of this nature.
And I noticed in there that they're not responsible for clearing the walls or moving any of the furniture. How is our administration going to handle that?
It's a great question. I can tell you how we did it at Farmington. We basically gave each teacher a list of things they needed to do to prepare their classrooms. And basically, the simple version is everything shoves towards the middle, get it off the walls.
Okay.
Protect projectors, things that have to stay on the walls, put plastic over those things and protect them. Now, anything that teachers don't do, I just warn them that people are going to be coming in behind and doing it for them, but they might not be as careful or nice with their things as the teacher themselves might be. So please prepare your classroom to be painted. For heavy lifting or things that teachers can't handle, sometimes it's been me and Mr. Law going in and doing it. Last summer, we actually did hire some movers to actually help with the situation when we came in and realized we weren't going to have enough manpower to get the job done. So it will be a hodgepodge approach of that nature where teachers are doing some, administration is doing some, we're going to do what we can, and if we get to the point where we need to, we will get some movers to come in and help.
Okay.
Any other
It's-
questions?
Yeah, that's the hardest part in my opinion. I mean, getting it ready to paint is highly underrated. No, that's all I have.
There are no other questions? We're going to move on to the Farmington ceiling tile and grid replacement. Mr. Caffey.
This was a project, it's been in our plan, just like Houston High's painting is for the past
And you've also got some
several years.
pictures.
Oh, I also have some pictures that'll be looping on the screen up there for some of our not so pretty ceiling tiles and grids at Farmington. But this has been a project that's been in our plan for the past 4 years. It's a project that I truly believe also needs to be done at Dogwood and the old building at Riverdale as well, and it's in our plan to complete those FY19 and FY20, so it would be next year and the following year. It's in the plan to paint Dogwood and paint the old buildings at Riverdale. And I realized in having a conversation with Mitzi May, our PTO president over at Farmington on Friday, that I had not done a very good job explaining the benefits of a ceiling tile and grid project. So I'm gonna go through some of those things and talk about, because I think a lot of people have the perception that this is just being done for aesthetics. And that is part of the reason that it's being done is for aesthetics. But there's a lot of different things that doing a project of this nature has benefit. And one of the things that we looked at when we specified the tile is the fire rating on the tile. The new tile that we're speccing has a little better fire rating than the old one. We're also seismically going to brace the new grid that's going to go in. So in the event of an earthquake situation, we would improve safety. Another big one that we looked at was sound attenuation. Every ceiling tile has a sound rating. The folks that rate them call it the noise reduction coefficient. And ceiling tile and grid, there's only so many things in a classroom that retain sound or affect sound. The ceiling tile and grid is one of them, and ceiling tiles and grids are rated all the way from 0 up to 100. The ceiling tiles that we spec'd are in the 85th percentile, so that doing a ceiling tile and grid project is going to improve sound throughout the building, but especially in classrooms. It's another one of the benefits of doing a job of this nature. Another thing that we looked at, and I know Mr. Pierce is chomping at the bit, should this get approved tonight, there's a whole other world above that ceiling tile and grid of wires and cables and you name it, that I won't say much more about, but that needs to be addressed. So having the ceiling tile and grid gone will give us the ability to really get up there and do that. The other thing, as you can see from some of the pictures here, over the years, these things collect. They collect mildew, they collect moisture, they collect dust. If a roof leak hits them, they collect stains. But ceiling tile affects the air quality in a building, and I'm the one who gets the complaints from parents that have students that are sensitive to allergens, sensitive to air quality. If there's mold that shows up, I get all of those. And this is something else, it's another benefit to doing a project of this nature. You're instantly improving the air quality in the building just by getting rid of the old tiles that are retaining all of those things. So that's another benefit that we have. And one of the things that we did with this package as well, we added an alternate, a bid alternate for replacing with LED lights. And last year we bid out just ceiling tile and grid, and the bid came in at $723,000. That's why we never brought it to the board, because that bid was $223,000 more than this bid that just came in, and this bid includes LED lights with it in addition to the ceiling tile and grid. So we were pleased overall with the price and what this came in at for the job, and it's gonna be the same if the board approves this tonight at Farmington, where they're having to kill nights and weekends to be able to accomplish this job in a 7-week time frame. So all of those things being said, this one, back in October, the Strategic Facilities Planning Committee put this one as third for maintenance projects, again, after buildings. Farmington HVAC units and Houston High's painting was past it. I think the board's list that they just put together had it 5th on the list. And when I look at projects, this is something else that I haven't, said enough. When we look at projects, we're looking at where does a student spend the majority of their day? Where do these projects, where are they going to have an impact? And as you guys know, you've seen our wish list, you know what capital funding we have. We're doing the projects that we can with the budget that we have, but when I look at a kid, they're spending 80 to 90% of their day in a classroom. So when we look at projects, we want to affect that classroom with projects that we do. And a ceiling tile and grid project, I mean, you're talking about improving aesthetics, air quality, sound quality, and with the bid alternate lighting in a building, we believe in this project as well as getting this project done at Dogwood and the old building at Riverdale. We see value in it.
And I will put that this would dramatically change the school. We're in a situation right now where we inherited Farmington and it had a lot of needs, and we did the windows because just for the utility's sake, the old windows were letting air in and out and they were brittle and you couldn't see through. And now we've upgraded those windows. We finished the painting project at this school. This is the last touch, and you're doing lighting and the ceiling grid. This would be a dramatic project for this school, this district. And I know that we've talked about Farmington's bathrooms. That is something that is a priority for us that we do want to tackle, but no, that will be the last thing in this school that we really have to address. Once we've done this, we have really changed Farmington Elementary School and made it a new school. If you think about the walls with the paint, the windows, the ceiling, and this is going to change the air quality dramatically in that school. And we've got new HVAC that is going on the school. So we've had the issues with the HVAC at Farmington. So we will be finally getting to the point at Farmington where we're caught up on that deferred maintenance.
What would-
Questions?
With the LED lighting, I know also there, we've talked about savings in utilities.
Yes.
What is the projected savings?
So most most models that you look at in 5 to 7 years, you're getting your money back. You get the savings on the utilities, but also you're getting the savings on the replacement time. The LEDs last a
longer.
whole lot longer.
Yes.
There's also a recycling cost in my maintenance budget because it's against code and against environmental regulations to throw the compact fluorescents in the garbage. So we actually have to pay a company to come out and pick up the CFLs when they are no longer useful. We can't just throw them away. So you're getting savings there as well.
Okay. And how long typically, I mean, I know these have probably been here since Farmington was built.
They are original to the building,
Yes.
as are Dogwoods, as are
Right.
Riverdales.
So I'm imagining we're not wanting to keep these for 40 more years, but typically, what is the rotation?
So the ceiling tile and grid that we specified has a 20-year warranty
Okay.
on it, but you should expect 30 years out of it. And the ceiling tile and grid that we spec'd, we really looked hard at, you know, the elements of it, and another benefit is what's up there is up there. It's the cheapest ceiling tile and grid that you can throw up. The one that we spec'd actually has a moisture-resistant element to it where it naturally resists water. Now, if you dip it in a gallon, it's not going to resist that, but it is naturally resistant to moisture, it's naturally resistant to water, and it's also naturally resistant to microbes and all of the other things that like to cling to it. It naturally fights that stuff off. Now, it's not going to do that perfectly, but it's a whole lot better than what we've got.
Just a question. If they are damaged, I would think that we could replace them.
Yes.
I mean, and then keep up that.
Which is what we.
I mean, we're
which-
now.
Which
just-
is what we do
you know,
now.
We can't just go in and
Right.
replace one or two. But I'm thinking long-term here, if one is damaged, we will be able to go in and
Cycle.
replace that one.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Other questions?
I just had a question for Mr. Pierce, maybe it's just the wiring that's gonna be done. I mean, from a student perspective, is there another impact there that will help the school? If you just,
Definitely.
Farmington has got one of the oldest cabling jobs in the district. It's hardwired Ethernet. It's the slowest speed of just about any of the schools. I mean, that and Dogwood are pretty much the same.
okay,
The cabling job that I'm planning to do will bring it right up to par with Riverdale's new addition, which is
okay,
future-proof probably for the next 5 to 10 years.
okay.
Anything else?
They will see immediate results. It will be night and day difference.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Kathy, for that detail. That was very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
For sure.
Anything else?
No, ma'am?
Okay. Mr. Kathy, custodial contract extension.
I'll go through the history of this as well. So when we began the district, we started with GCA, had them for a year. We put it out to RFP after our first year, awarded to ABM, went with them for 2 years. We just recently went out to RFP again this past year, had a committee that sat down, looked at all of the responses that came in, awarded to American Facility Services. We're on our third company in 4 years. The problems haven't changed. They're still there and very well aware of them. And the biggest ones that we see, we've got high labor turnover in those positions. We've got quality of work issues. We have supply issues. We've had equipment quality issues. We've had high management turnover, loss prevention. Those are all issues that we have dealt with custodial, and it hasn't changed. The labor pool here for those jobs is the labor pool here. It's usually the same workers. They're getting hired by a different company to do the same job. I actually sat down and met with our custodial management a few weeks ago, and they ran a report by zip code on where their employees are coming from. And I'm sure the board can guess the number of employees that we have living in the city of Germantown. It's 0. The custodial staff that we have at our schools commutes usually a significant distance out to our schools at $9 an hour and no benefits package. So the first opportunity they get for a better pay and a better situation, they jump on it and they take it. And that's why we continue to see the high labor turnover that we have. So when we try 3 companies in 4 years, and we could try another company. I'm not convinced it would fix the problem. So at the end of the day, one of the things that we put on our wish list was a hybrid approach. Another thing we have to consider, again, this company is brand new to Tennessee that's working with us now. They've never been here before. And Durham, if we had judged them based on their first year, it looked a lot different year 4 than it looked year 1. The recommendation that we're bringing is to give this company 1 more year, extend the contract 1 more year, kind of with the understanding that this is a decision year. If it doesn't get better, if it stays the same, then we're looking at a different solution of possibly going in-house or going out to RFP. We did do an in-house analysis just to look and see if we paid $14 an hour, full benefits package that the district normally gets. These folks are 12 months employees, so they work the same calendar year that principals work, that central office employees work. And we were looking at well over $1 million in order to be able to accomplish that, plus paying for all of the supplies and equipment that come with that. With all of the all that we have on the table right now, with the elementary school being built and us not truthfully knowing what that operating cost is going to look like, and with a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, I didn't feel really good about coming to the board with a recommendation of that nature at this time. So the recommendation is going to be to extend this contract for 1 more year, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
You had mentioned, that there are several issues that we have. What is our communication with them? I mean, if we go back and we're extending this contract, is there a formal notification that we give them if these are the things that we've not been happy with? What is our strategy to work on them?
Yes, ma'am. We have quarterly review meetings with the management to go over. Our plant managers also have a monthly checklist that they do at the building level to look for deficiencies or things of that nature, and those are taken to the custodial management's attention. And I've also got several emails that I've sent to the management staff outlining and detailing the problems that we've had with them. And for the most part, they make an effort at trying to improve them, but then it lulls back into business as usual, and then we have to go back and address again. So those are the tools that we have in place. We do our quarterly review meetings, we do our monthly checklists and get them any issues that we have. And then if there's a problem that's urgent, like running out of supplies at school, that's an immediate fire that we put out at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Is there any penalty that they incur if we have a certain number of complaints or issues?
The penalty that's in the contract right now is if they don't staff appropriately for a period of 2 days or more, they can have a 25% penalty put on them for that, and we have put that penalty on them several times this year to enforce that. We also do have the ability, if it gets to the point where it's no longer tenable, to give them a written legal notice that they have 30 days to take corrective action, and then give them their 30 days, and then come back to the table and decide if they have taken that corrective action or if we're moving away from the contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, we're glad you showed up today. We wouldn't have had an agenda. Approval of the Forest Hill Irene Road Improvement Project.
As you guys know, the city is going to be doing the Forest Hill Irene widening project as we are doing the new elementary school and central office construction project. The request that's before you, and in order to accomplish this, the city has been acquiring rights of way up and down Forest Hill Irene. They've got to go from Poplar Pike to Winchester. So they're acquiring rights of way from citizens, and we happen to be one of the bodies that they have to acquire the right of way from. In some cases, they're having to outright buy land. In other cases, in our case, the right of way that's there is enough for them to do the widening project without actually having to sign over land to them. So some property owners, they're having to put in an offer, buy a piece of land in order to give themselves space. Others, like us, where we have a 57-foot right-of-way that currently exists, that's sufficient for them to widen. So the request that's before you is to give the city temporary slope and construction easements to complete the work. At the end of the project, this agreement dies. The land stays with us the whole time. We're not exchanging land in any way, shape, or form. This is just us giving the city temporary easements in order to be able to complete the Forest Hill Irene widening project. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about that as well.
You answered one of mine earlier today. How will this affect construction on the elementary school?
The city's goal and what they have told us is in front of the school, from Poplar Pike to in front of the school is their priority area. So that is where they are going to stage their construction and then start working down towards Winchester. And so there's going to have to be some coordination, some cooperation, some working together on this because we are going to trip up over each other some. So yes, we are going to have to work together and make sure that we're playing nice in the sandbox with each other.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, so hearing what you're saying about it being temporary, can you just walk me through the contract where it says contract for sale and purchase of the real estate? Where does it say that once this is done?
Yes, ma'am. I'll
It's in
take
there.
you.
It's in there. I did the same thing you
I'm sure
did.
I missed that.
It's in there.
I'm pulling it up right now, and if you go to the last page, Exhibit A, on the attachment, it's page 404.
Mhm.
And if you look at the last line under temporary slope easement 1, temporary slope easement 2, and temporary construction easement, each one of those concludes by saying this easement shall terminate upon completion of the contemplated improvements to Forest Hill Irene Road. And again, that's on, have you found it yet, Mr.
Yeah,
Jones?
no, I found it. I was
Okay.
just wondering where in the actual contract does Exhibit A reference?
So Exhibit A, let's see. It's a good question.
I know, I saw it in there.
Yeah, got me too.
I'm not finding it right this second.
Oh, here.
Here it
The
is,
easement shall.
number one on
Page, there it is, page 1,
Page one.
number 1.
And also at the very end, it also,
Does it say it again at the
it
end?
talks about again about it'll terminate.
Yeah, and it actually references it in the contract. Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am, under
Yeah.
number 1,
Yeah.
on page 1.
And so
Yeah.
this is only the land that touches Forest Hill Irene
Yes, ma'am.
Road currently? Okay.
That
There's
is
just that.
correct.
Obviously, I'm not very good at reading easement leave.
It's just, it's a very small piece of land, and it's only, and we're just allowing access, and that's it.
And then just another, are we delinquent?
Delinquent?
That is when, I can give you the short version.
Yeah.
No, we're not delinquent.
Okay. Then that's fine.
When we did the closing and the land transfer,
Mhm.
somehow the Shelby County assessors got it in their head that we also took on ownership rights to 9190 Winding Oak Way, which is the piece of property
Mhm.
that the
Mhm.
very large property sits on. So it didn't sign over ownership rights to us, but it put in care of Germantown Board of Education. Now, where they got that idea, I have no idea. We've been back through all of the paperwork, but that's in the process of being
Cleared
corrected.
up
So
for
no,
this
we're not
process.
delinquent.
The closing attorneys.
Yeah.
Closing
Although we
attorney
would
is
take that
working on
property,
it.
I would be
I was
glad
gonna
to be
say, yeah,
delinquent if
yeah,
you
yeah.
just
For
give us that
for
property,
amount,
yes.
Yes,
If that's all we had to do, to get
exactly,
that.
yes, yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Cathy? Mr. Cathy, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
You can take a deep breath now. And we get to put Mr. Jones on the hot seat for the first reading of the FY 18-19 general fund budget.
And I think, yeah, well, this is, I'm going to do it during have a presentation that's a recap of what we did during our previous work session. So you'll see it, yeah, you'll see it twice.
Twice tonight.
But know that, yes, know that I'm going to go through this
Sure,
again for the
sure.
public. I'll forego my superintendent's report, because
Sure.
I'll have done enough reports for tonight. But I'll go through some of the highlights. No, you're good. So as we previously discussed in our last work session, we owe a lot of thanks to Mr. Jones, to the entire cabinet, to Ms. Crowder for their work on this document, because this looks different than all of our budget documents in the past. You go online and look at it, it's just numbers. The goal and the vision that Mr. Jones had when he thought of this a few months ago was that our community should understand how we're spending our dollars and how we're being good stewards of the money that we are given by our taxpayers. So thanks to everyone who played a role in this process to create this document, but also know that this was a difficult process for us to complete. I think it's important to know that we have driving factors when we create this budget. We are actually looking at our board's strategic goals. And so we talk about these strategic goals of maximizing every student's potential. That we are going to get the best out of all of our students, and we're going to remove any obstacles in their way that are stopping them from learning or achieving. And then two, when we talk about recruiting, developing, and retaining exemplary staff, all the research shows that the most important factor in a classroom is the teacher that you have there. And so that's why this is a very important strategic goal for this board, and the fact that we are going to grow and develop our teachers. Third is mobilizing community engagement for the system's benefit. And hopefully you have seen this in everything that I have done as a superintendent. The committees that we have, the surveys that we do, the forums that we have, that type of community engagement is not typical in most school districts across the state or the country. And so I was grateful enough to be recognized for our work around community engagement. But know that that's one of the goals for this board. Establishing 21st century classrooms in schools, when we talk about our limitations, but what we're doing around the one-to-one initiative and how we're changing classroom settings. And then finally, to work effectively and efficiently as a school board. All very important goals as a district, and that's what really drives this budget process. Then when we look at the Tennessee Succeeds, we are a public school system in the state of Tennessee, so we also have to align our goals to those state initiatives, and they do intertwine very well together. So when we look at early foundations in literacy, whether we're talking about in language arts, our students really being strong readers by the time they reach 3rd grade, or in our math curriculum, do they really have strong foundations that are going to help them throughout their career? Or when we're talking about high school, post-secondary, are we preparing them to go into the job market? Are we preparing them to go on to secondary institutions? And then all means all, that regardless of where students come to us and their challenges that they face, that we're going to remove all those barriers so that they can be successful. Those all go into our board strategic goal of maximizing student potential. Know that those are all intertwined for us. When we look at the state's initiative of what are we doing with our teachers, that we're going to have quality staff, that really is the recruit, develop, and retain exemplary staff. When we look at our board's goals of 3, 4, and 5, that's district empowerment. What initiatives are we doing as a district to really get the most out of our students and reach those other goals? So know that they do align with each other. But no, I think it's really important to talk about the current reality of where we are in the school system. I think people are under the misunderstanding that we are in a wealthy municipality and that we have lots of funding for all the projects and programs we want, and that's far from the truth. In actuality, we're in the bottom 16% of the state in the per pupil funding. We receive approximately $8,769 per student when you look at all of our revenue sources for kids. So when we talk about the difficult decisions that the board has to make, that the cabinet had to make when we're coming up with this process, these were some of those challenges. And so you can see the other districts that are listed well ahead of us as far as funding. Two, also, I think it's important to know, and you'll see the theme here, and it's kind of like the target theme of expect more, pay less. Ours is we're expecting more and we're doing more with even less. So know that even though we have limitations on funding, we have a lot of really important initiatives that this board needs to take pride in, that our community should take pride in. Our average salary for our teachers is $58,000 in this new budget, and that goes towards our strategic goal of recruiting, developing, and retaining exemplary staff. When we look at the state's BEP funding and the state's average salary, it's at $46,000. We've said that we want to remove obstacles for students, and so students who have medical issues, we want to make sure that they're able to achieve also. So our board has decided that we are not just going to have the minimum funding for nurses, and 1 in 3,000. We have a staffing, we have 6 nurses in the district, 1 per every 1,000 students. That goes towards maximizing student potential. When we talk about school clerical, we're funded for 16 positions in the district, and we actually fund 26 positions in the district, so that our teachers aren't having to leave class so that they can schedule IEP meetings. So we want them to focus on instruction. We don't want them performing those clerical duties. So that helps them develop teachers, and that helps the staff stay, that they're not having to take time out of their classroom. RTI coach is currently unfunded by the state. We have 5 positions that goes towards maximizing student potential, and we spend about $375,000 annually. That's all in with benefits for those RTI coaches in the district, because we see the need to focus on individual students and where they're performing. But then also, we have really large district initiatives that you don't see in other districts. We are spending $1.8 annually on capital outlay, and that goes towards our 21st century classrooms. So know that is something that we're looking at. Now, that number 1.8 does include debt service payments that we're currently spending on Riverdale. We are paying for Riverdale's expansion. The city put $7 million into that project. We put $5 million into that project, so know that goes into that $1.8 million. When we talk about the blended learning initiative, we're spending over $600,000 so that all of our students in grades 6 through 12 can have devices. That's an incredible program for our students that this board has chosen as being important. And then being good stewards of our funding. We're making sure that what we're promising our retirees we can pay for, regardless of whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. We are fully funding our OPEB benefits for our employees. That's not common in other districts. A lot of them are doing pay-as-you-go. So know that this is a $500,000 annual cost for us to do the fully funding of our OPEB. And then finally, later start times. Once again, the same as school nurses, initiatives that we think will remove barriers for children. This board has decided that they're spending $300,000 annually because they saw that as being something important for students. So no, these are initiatives that we can take pride in as a district, that even though we're experiencing funding limitations, they're incredible things that we're doing. But we still have goals and things that we want. We have programs that we want, but know that we do have these great things happening in the district. So we talked about the fact that part of my role as superintendent was to make sure that we are taking into account the future considerations that we have as a board, the future concerns that we need to have. And so you know that we were only provided $27 million for the new elementary school, and that was calculating on $165 per square foot amount for our new elementary school. Construction costs are higher than that at this time, so know that that's a future concern for the district. Also, you can see the spreadsheet that's grayed out behind it. We have spent a lot of time calculating what is going to be the impact on the general fund once we open the new elementary school. So looking at salary and fringes, utilities, transportation, maintenance, instructional supplies, janitorial, know that we're predicting it's going to cost us about $2.8 million that we don't currently have budgeted in the future to open that new elementary school. Another initiative this board has talked about is staffing below the state's maximum amounts. And so we looked at optimal capacity. Based on our current numbers of students that we have right now, and looking at the BEP numbers that we're funded for, we've done allotment to get to our optimal capacity numbers. So know that you can see, for example, Houston High School is currently staffed at a 1-to-20 ratio, teachers to students, well below the state's maximum. Houston Middle School 7 through 8, same thing. It's staffed currently, and this was pulled from Skyward on April 10th of this year. They're staffed at 1 to 25.9 in 7 and 8, so they're also below optimal capacity, would not require additional staff. 6th grade at Houston Middle School would require additional staff, so they would require 1 teacher. And that's all in with benefits when you see that $75,000, so we've taken the average teacher salary. So I won't go through all the teacher-student ratios, but know that when we looked at every single one of our schools, Riverdale, for example, elementary, it would require 3 teachers in K-3 to move to those numbers. So all in, it would cost the district about $1.2 million. So know that that's a funding initiative that we're keeping on the back burner, something that we're thinking about funding in the future and how we can accomplish that. We also talked about in our last board section, another concern for the district is once we have the complete build out of the city is what's happening with our middle school capacity numbers. And so this is another excerpt from a presentation that you saw on our build out numbers. That was January 10th, looking at how much we would exceed capacity once the city of Germantown is built out. And so at the maximum capacity, we would be 155 students above our ability to house them in our schools. At optimal capacity, we would be 253 students above our capacity in our current facilities. So no, that's a future issue that we need to be aware of. And now we get into the budget. So know that all those initiatives, the great things we're doing, the amount of funding that we're receiving, those are all taken into consideration as we started going through and looking at this budget document. So I'd like to highlight some of the things that we discussed during our board work session. So when we start with our highest funding source, our state education funds. And once again, this is an approximation, so we look at this. We won't know this until we get our final BEP allotments at the end of this year. So know that we're projecting $27 million in our highest revenue source, which is from our state education BEP funds. The next largest funding source are our county funds, and that's calculated on WFT, it's weighted full-time equivalent of our average daily attendance. That's why attendance is so important in our schools. That's one of the ways that we get our percentage of funding. So know that we receive $23 million from our county taxes. And then we also receive $2.4 million from the city. So I do want to clarify that yes, the city is our funding body, but the majority of it is passed through coming from state funds and from county funds. But they are giving us the $2.4 million, which is the 15-cent equivalent on property tax. When we look at our general fund expenditures, this is the highlight sheet. We'll go through and talk about each of those different areas, so I won't read through all the highlights that you see in this budget, but know that the cabinet was really charged with creating a budget neutral document. With all those big expenses coming in the district, when we look at opening a new elementary school, when we look at cost of construction, we did not feel like this was a time to really be adding programs and initiatives, even though we want them, and we value all those programs and initiatives and see value in them. We couldn't balance this budget while adding those. So let's talk about some of the highlights that we saw in each of the departments. So in Student Services Department, you know, we were talking about there is a line item there for security cameras that you see listed, and know that that is spread out over several budgets, but that is something that we've included in the Department of Student Services. When we look at Department of Operations, we did add an additional position in the Department of Operations. We had previously had a shared service position. There was a man who worked in Arlington, and every morning he would wake up and he would monitor the HVAC systems. If he saw that the output and input of those systems was not consistent, he would actually call in a work order and get the crews out there before students and teachers ever arrived at that building. That is no longer an option for us to share with that shared service. So Mr. Cappy, creating a budget neutral position, took the portion of money that we were paying Arlington and decreased another line item in his salary, in his budget, to create a salary for this person. Then also you see in his budget there's construction of new elementary school and central office. That is one of the biggest changes that you see in his budget, that money has come over. And then there's a reduction in the transportation payment to Collierville. That penalty payment of $175 is going away to Collierville. When we look at the Department of Human Resources, this is something that I think is important because we have the governor who's been saying that they're trying to increase teacher pay, and as a board and as a school district, we have not done that at this point, but it was our request to do that at this point. So we built in a 1% COLA for all employees across the district. So no, there is a 1% increase. I do not think that is where we need to end up. I do think that when we do receive our BP numbers, and we'll talk about that, my request would be to go ahead and get it up to a 2% increase, but we couldn't do that at this time looking at our current projections of revenue. So before this cycle is complete, it would be my recommendation to have a 2% COLA for staff. And then you'll also see in this budget highlight, like when we went through each of these categories, there were partial salaries included because it is our goal to go ahead and staff for the new elementary school. So the recommendation would be to hire the principal at Christmas time so that second semester they could be on staff. They can go ahead and hire the individuals that would work for them, but they wouldn't actually come on payroll until the summer. So we actually have partial positions, assistant principals, guidance counselor, clerical staff that would come on during June of that summer. So that's why you see partial salaries included in the Department of Human Resources. Under the Department of Finance, one of the things that I think we should take pride in is that we have reduced the transfer of general fund to the cafeteria account. So the board made a very difficult decision. We became only the second district in the state to outsource cafeteria nutrition because we experienced a $300,000 loss our first year because we have so few free and reduced students we don't get those reimbursements that a lot of districts receive. And over time, we have seen those amounts decrease by $226,000. We are optimistic that we are going to end this year with zero amount being transferred from the general fund to cafeteria, and the next year the same thing. But we still have to budget conservatively just in case the sales are off from what they were the past years. But Airmark has been dramatically moving in the right direction, that it's going to be a self-sustaining account. Other things that you see in this budget process under the Department of Technology, they have added another cost-neutral position. Their number of devices, because we will be fully implemented in the one-to-one initiative next year, so all students grades 6 through 12 will finally have those devices. And with that increase of an additional 1,880 devices, they've requested an additional person. So this person is paid for out of the funds that we receive from parents with the insurance costs for those devices, so they'll help this one-to-one initiative. So this was a cost-neutral position. And also in this budget highlight, there were increases in safety software and security cameras. And so we discussed those during the last work session. So just so you can see the change over time, this is another one of those initiatives that we can't forget how incredible it is that all students are receiving devices in grades 6 through 12. Only 15% of school districts in Tennessee have really achieved that one-to-one environment. So know that that's a highlight for us. That's something that I think is special. Under the Department of Exceptional Student Education, this would be the one department where they were not able to balance a budget and create cost-neutral positions. But we talked about the fact that with our students with special needs, it's really driven by the individual students, the IEP meetings, and how we have to serve these students. So by law, when we look at the speech services, the number of psychologists in the district, the BCBA, the people who are serving our students with behavior, we were kind of piecemealing how we were serving these things or meeting these needs for students. So we were outsourcing a lot of these different programs. And so it's now time to bring these in-house and know that these were needs that we discussed during the budget time based on the caseload for our special needs students. So know that you'll see 2 SPED education assistants based on increases in those programs. So these were the requests from the Department of Exceptional Student Education. Under academics, we did have a required increase in TCRS, that's the retirement system for staff. We had to put in more funding by law, so they told us that you have to do this in order to fund their needs. So we saw an increase of 9.08 to 10.46, and know that that was a substantial increase cost of operation for the district. Every year we also build in 5 growth positions in the district, so we know that as our enrollment goes up, we're going to have to be flexible and be able to move with those student increases. And so Riverdale consumed a lot of those last year at the beginning of the school year, but know that we've already built in 5 more additional growth positions for the district. Under the superintendent, there were very few changes. There was a small minor increase in salary for the front desk clerical. That was a 12-month position that was getting paid less than the front desk clerical at all of the schools. So we made sure that her pay was level with the front desk receptionist at the schools. Under the school board, this is another area that I think that we need to make sure that we are really praising the board's decision on. We are once again fully funding our ADC, our ARC, for our OPEB. So know that we are fully funding our benefits for our employees. There was also a slight increase in board travel. And then last but not least, we talked about the fact that one of our goals is to recruit, develop, and retain exemplary staff. And I think the reason that we talked about giving a 1% increase is that our starting salary was below the other municipalities. And I think Ms. Stratton and Mr. Haddock would tell you one of the challenges with our new teachers recruiting them is when they look at starting pay a lot of times, even though the benefits package is better here, they're just looking at that bottom line of what they're going to take home. But we will continue to talk about the fact that we have an incredible insurance package that also saves you money. But know that this is something that we do want to strive for, that we have comparable salaries to the other districts in the area. So know that after a 1% increase, Germantown's starting salary would move to $42,766. That's still below the $43,190 for the other districts. But as we see the increase in OPEB funding, it would be our request to go ahead and make that a 2% increase across the board, and then at that point, we would be comparable with starting salaries with the other districts. But no, that's dependent upon those increases in OPEB funding.
BEP?
In the BEP, yes. Excuse me, I said OPEB. Wrong acronym. BEP funding. But know that we don't want our community to think that, oh, we're just fine with where we are with the programs and initiatives that we had in the district. So we do have a list comprised from all the cabinet members when they were sharing out with the board about other programs and things that they would want. We made sure that we included this list of improvements that we have for the district, and know that we abbreviated a lot of these and cut it down so there's a lot more detail. But know that the first one for me would be go ahead and add that additional 1% so that we have a 2% increase. Technology talked about if we could upgrade all of our security cameras and cell phone boosters, that would be a cost of $261,000. Academic education talked about adding 4 instructional coaches in key areas of math, science, social studies, and language arts, and that's all in with benefits. CTE instructional supervisor, K-12 and science instructional supervisor, K-12 social studies, STEM lab upgrades. We had a foreign language committee that talked about how good it would be for our students to really expose them to foreign languages when they're in elementary school. And so we would request 3 additional foreign language positions for our elementary schools. Upgrading the high school's library because they do meet there for lots of different functions in the circulation library. Other needs. We talked about the fact that if we cannot find a company that can outsource our custodial work, can we hire one person at each school that is their job? Pay them more, make sure that they're vested in their school, and just like the plant manager, that they're there every day to work with the cleaning and making sure that they take pride in that. That would be a hybrid approach for us, and that would be one of my requests too. And that would be a cost of about $200,000 with benefits. 5 FTE SPED paraprofessional positions, a consulting teacher for a private school liaison, school nurses pay increase, moving a clerical position to a specialist transition in student services, and then having a safe school specialist. These were all things that we talked about at our last board meeting. So know that we're not forgetting that these are things that we would like to have in our district, but we could not fund them with our current budget as it is. And I think the most important before we start answering questions about the budget, and this is on the webpage. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend that you go to it. It lists all the incredible things, and we currently update this, that we have done in the district, whether we're talking about in financial department or academics, the programs that we've added, or for special needs students, whether we're talking about a job coach that we've created position. We are doing incredible things at this district. And I would say the overarching thing with this budget season was, even though it was difficult and it's been a challenge to balance this, and we didn't add a lot of great things to this program, we are doing more with less. We are doing, and I'm not talking about student performance, because I know that there are students in Shelby County Schools, for example, that need a lot more support, need a lot more help. What I'm talking about is just on the management side of, can we do one-to-one devices? Can we fully fund our OPEB? Those are things that can be done that I think are real decisions that this board has made. I think it's important to highlight that we are doing incredible things at the district, even with the limitations that we have. So I don't want us to ever get lost in the weeds of all the things that we want and forget what we have. So I do think that's a really special component of this district, and I'd like to highlight those initiatives that we've done again that are really incredible for Germantown Municipal Schools. And we're only on year 4, and the best is yet to come. With that, we would open it up to questions about specific budget items.
Could we get an electronic copy of the unfunded request?
Yes.
That would
Please.
be great.
Yes.
Questions?
And I did that quicker than we did in the last work session.
Yes,
so.
you did great.
No, it was really summarized because we don't go.
That was good.
Questions?
Any detailed questions, additional information?
I don't necessarily have any questions about the actual budget. I do have questions about how we're gonna present this to the city and what our requests will be, and I don't know if that's a separate conversation on this, but one of the things that I think that came out in what you were talking about, I think is a big highlight, is where we fall in funding statewide, in the bottom 16%. And I would say that, based on the research that I've seen, is that the differential between where we are and where maybe some other districts that are comparable to us as far as Title I funding, other things, is where their local districts or their local governments are funding and adding in extra. And I think when we look at what you've been able to do with so few dollars, it is incredible. I think we've been able to do that personally because of some of our overcapacity situation where we've had less space. So we haven't had the utilities, we haven't had the additional bus routes, the additional teachers that we may need. And I'm not as concerned about this year's budget as I am about the next year's budget. And when you look at that large dollar amount of the $2.8 million, and we're not even touching optimal classroom size, that's just what you need. I mean, I think you're very probably conservative in that number when you look at the positions you feel like you have to add. That's almost $3 million.
I think it'd be more like 4.
Yeah, I
think you're
completely
right.
agree, Ms. Fisher, I completely agree. And I think that hearing, and I don't know that everybody was able to attend our work session, but I would highly recommend you listening to it because each of these cabinet members came in and talked about the scrounging they had to do to add a staff just to help out. And I think they've done an incredible job. I don't know that we can get any further cuts. I think the thought that we could find money somewhere in our budget to cover that, I just don't see that that's a possibility. And I think that we need to start having that hard conversation with the city because a $3 million addition, that's double, more than double what they're currently giving us. And I don't see that coming from the state or the county. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah.
It's a fair comment.
And reserves only last but so long.
Well, and I will tell you, I really appreciated your document here. Because when you look at that reserve of what we're taking it down to, we're pretty close to not being able to get anything else out of there. I mean, maybe you have a safety, that's what it's there for, it's a safety net if there's something that happens. And if I'm looking at this correctly, when you have the estimate line on here, that's what we're anticipating spending this year. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There'll be other funds added into that, capital projects,
Right.
federal and
Right, but just
cafeteria.
that FY18 is just, so when I look at those expenses, and you correct me here, we're pretty neutral. If you take out the capital
Yes.
outlay, we're neutral expenses year to year, although our student numbers are going up. Devices are going up. The work that we need to do. So I would just love to, as a board, talk about how we can frame this to the board, to the FAC as to this year from an operating perspective, we would love some more because I do think everything on that unfunded, there's nothing out of this world on that. There's no pie in the sky in that unfunded request.
All of that is reasonable.
There's nothing that says, oh, wow, that's crazy. There's no district that has that. So I think that if we can present that, I just would like to have a conversation about, because I'm very concerned about the following year. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm concerned from a funding perspective where we're going to be and how we're going to pay for this.
So I can tell you that Ms. Landers and I were meeting today to talk about that presentation.
Perfect.
I have asked for her to start with the beginning of the presentation because I do think it's important for you all to talk about the decisions that you've made as a board that really set us apart from other districts. So everything, you have seen everything that we're going to present in some form or fashion. So the beginning of this presentation is almost the same presentation, but we're going to talk about who's doing what role. So I think it's important to talk about our current status of funding, our current things that we're doing, but I'm also going to talk about the things that we are concerned about in the future, those expenses that we had. That's why we are taking those into account. So we're going to hit all of those things that we don't have. We're going to share the list of unfunded objectives that we have. That's why we made that list of items. So we're going to share those lists with the FAC. So know that the only things that they have, so they're going to see something very similar to this, what I just did. The difference is going to be, it will end with the capital improvements conversation. So we talk about historically what have we done to our buildings, what has the district put into those projects. So know that that's going to be the difference. And then to highlight the initiatives or the main things that y'all said were your top 3 priorities, and that was the school safety and security, the Riverdale boiler and chiller changing over to an HVAC system, and Dogwood's ADA upgrade. So, no, those are the priorities. That doesn't remove the other things on our CIP list, because we still have those other items on the CIP list. So I do want to say that those aren't going away. I did change the language per your request about the line item about the gym that we previously had for Houston High School. So there was no confusion about that being
What that is.
the field house that we had discussed. So know that has been changed in that document. So it just says Houston High School Gym Complex.
So that will be a part of the presentation,
So that dovetails.
page that you have,
So
okay,
the
that has
presentation you've
everything
just
on
seen
there.
with the beginning, with Ms. Landers and I taking turns on
Right.
the highlights of what we're currently doing, and I'll probably do the bad part, which is the hard initiatives, the challenges that we see coming as far as funding.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll dovetail in the capital improvements on the end of that. So
But you'll have that 5-year outlook
Yes.
on there. The one question I have is, so this was sent to the city, this
Yes.
5-year outlook on operating. And I was just wondering if we could talk about this for just a minute, because when I look at the increases here, I only see an increase in expense of $1.1 million going from fiscal year 19
Right.
to fiscal year 20, and I would have expected to see at least 3 or 4 million.
And the reason we do that is because as a school district, we don't budget this. So this is a city funding document. So we don't budget that way. We don't put in the calculations. That's why they have the BEP process. We do a year-to-year budget as far as the projection. So that's why what we will give the caveat of, that doesn't include the real increases. That doesn't include the fact that I think we're going to have $3 to $4 million in additional funding for the new elementary school. That doesn't include the fact that if we want to go to optimal capacity, there's 1.2. It also doesn't include the growth. So know that that's not those projections of years out are not real projections. We can't do that as a school district.
The only thing I will say is, knowing how the machine works, these are the numbers that are going to get plugged in. And we can say in a slide that we need another 2.8 million or another 3, but if it's not somewhere in this document, it will get lost in their machine profile, and they'll be looking and saying, oh, they only need another 1.1 million, not the 3. So I don't know if there's any
Yeah,
way that we could
we'll go
somehow
through,
footnote that and say very big and bold, so that when they're looking at this page as well, it's very obvious that we are needing, that this isn't reality.
Right.
Per se, is that this, maybe somehow
Yeah,
caveat that.
those are just COLAs or CPI index
I
increases.
completely
And,
agree.
We'll go through, 2 or 3 more rounds with the cities so we could
I'm
make it
just-
more realistic, I
I'm
guess.
just concerned that if I'm in the FAC and I'm sitting around the table and I have this document from the city and then I have your presentation, they don't match.
Right.
And I don't know if there's a way to work with them to figure out how to make sure that message is conveyed to the FAC, but when I looked at this, I was expecting to see big increases after having looked at this, and I don't necessarily see that.
Right. Because
And I understand the
Because we
mechanics.
can't,
No,
because
I-
like if the board hadn't voted on optimal capacity yet, then we can't plug that in, or we haven't
Well-
voted for the budget for the new elementary schools.
And I don't know, we haven't necessarily voted on all this either. I mean, they're not approved, so I don't know if you can asterisk to say that it would take board approval to say this, that each of these years would have to be.
Oh,
But
most
the big
definitely,
items
yes.
that included here, I just think visually, they need to see that pop.
Mhm.
They need to see that actually comes up, and what that number would mean to their funding. I just think a picture's worth a
I see where you're
1,000
coming from.
words, and,
Well, and I think the message too has to be, if we're to maintain this district at the level we currently are,
that
the
is
level of
exactly right.
excellence,
That's right.
then that comes at a cost, that comes at a price. And we're talking really about 2 different funding. We're talking about the general budget fund and the CPI. In my mind, that's 2 separate conversations.
Absolutely,
The
I agree.
CIP is a different, but to
Yes.
maintain a district at the level we are, then there's gonna have to be the conversation that 2.4 million is gonna need to increase.
That's right.
Maybe not overnight, but it's gonna need to come up.
Right. Well, and I think, to your point is, if we don't get it, I don't know what you do. And like I said, y'all, we've cut this budget to pieces. I mean, even if you took all
Where
your,
are we gonna get it from?
I mean, even if you didn't do any maintenance, right? Even if you shut all that down, you'd be
That's-
hard pressed to cover it. Is that
That's still
fair?
1.8, I mean, that's
Mm.
not enough for the 4 million that you're gonna need to.
So that's where we get into the difficult conversations. So when we talk about how can we fund this, you have options of increasing enrollment, so taking more transfers. That's burdensome in and of itself, because there are increased costs that come with
That's right.
taking increased numbers
It's
of
not a
students.
one-for-one.
So that is one of the ways that you can accommodate that, by getting more revenue from those students. The other is by cutting those things that we think are special. So if we talk about the 1.8 million that we're investing in capital improvement projects, do we shut down improving our schools? Do we talk about our one-to-one initiative? Are we removing $600,000 a year for student devices? We talked about start times. Are we talking about reversing start times and going back to a 3-tier bus system and removing that? All those things that this board has said are special initiatives that we want to accomplish, all of a sudden those are the things that we lose in this process just to open the doors to run
Right.
school. So
Right.
know that that's the challenge with the budget process, and that's where I would see us having to go if we hit that direction. And heaven forbid we have to look at salaries for staff. At some point, we have to look at what our average teacher salary is compared to others. So know that all those things become very difficult conversations in the future.
What you just said, I think is phenomenal for the FAC to hear. Because if we don't have the funding, those are the hard decisions that we're gonna have to make. And I think for them to get prepped and thinking about next year and what that would entail, I think that's the reality of where we'll be.
I mean,
Very well said.
in addition to reductions, where do we have to freeze?
Right.
Freeze costs.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just can't commend the staff enough and what you've been able to do to get us to this point of where we need to be, because it has been a sacrifice to everyone, which I think you can tell by the unfunded requests. Because again, those are not out of
Yes.
the world requests, those are normal.
They're very
requests.
reasonable
Very
requests.
reasonable requests.
But also, as you go begging to the city for more money, as we have done every year since we've been in existence, you also have to include the things that they have ponied up and done.
Yes.
You have to, yes, you have to be
You
aware of
know,
that.
you have to pat them on the back before you kick them in the rear.
And I think that's,
The
and
school
that's an
resource
important part of this,
officers.
yes, presentation. We've had those joint meetings where we talk about the fact that we have a school resource officer in every school. When we talk about safety, that's something special.
They're
The fact that
covering
we're
our,
just
they're covering
finishing
our
our,
ransom,
yes.
our building.
They're
Yeah, we just
they're
finished
covering
our
our
fourth-
ransom, They're
yes.
covering our landscaping contracts, they're covering our, the $8 million.
$7 million for Riverdale, $1 million for Dogwood's roof, helping with the HVAC.
I'd much rather receive these large amounts rather than ask them to go up on their maintenance of effort.
I disagree with that, because maintenance of effort is what we have to do to staff a school. I mean, they could give us $10 million to go do capital improvements, but that's not gonna help us have to cut
You'd rather get
salaries.
4 than 10?
If it's recurring, absolutely, because
Well, it's been recurring. We got 27,
But it's for specific capital needs, and so we needed capital facilities, and I will say.
And we still do.
And we absolutely still do, and I will say that because you ask for money for a school district does not mean that you're kicking them in the rear. That means that you're working together as a partnership. We are a benefit, a huge benefit to this city. The sales tax increases going up, the property values going up. I mean, we are a big draw, and there's a cost associated with that. And I think that because we ask and you see our numbers increasing, and they're only going to increase, that's just a cost of doing business. And I think one of the things that we're doing and we're learning is how we're building that into their 5-year plan. I think when we started this district, we might not have been looking out to see what all that was going to cost at that time for the facilities, for the additional of the operating expenses. But at some point, we've got to move ourselves out of that 16% bottom. And I think that the benefits are endless to this city if we can continue. What I would say is if we have to make drastic cuts like that because we don't have the funding, that will not sit well. And I think that's more detrimental than having to bite the bullet and increase the operating budget.
I agree with you. I agree with you that we are a great asset. I mean, we worked hard to have this district,
Absolutely.
and we want to keep it at the top where we are. But we have to learn to tread lightly on our funding source. I mean, you want to go in hard, I understand that.
I
But-
think we go in begging is what I'm thinking we do. I don't think we go in hard saying you have to do this. I think it's what the superintendent said, is this is what will happen if we don't. We cannot get it, if that's the prerogative, but this is just know this is what will happen.
Well, and as you well know by attending the Board of Mayor and Alderman meetings, they have a lot of things on their plate too.
Absolutely. But I
So-
think we have to lay it out there, and then they have to make the decision. I mean, that's not our decision to make. All we can do for our students and for our district is to present our case, to say this is what we need to do the best by our students. And then it's up to the city and the funding body to determine where we fall in the pecking order. I completely agree. But I think we have to ask, and we have to be very,
I think we do a
very
disservice.
specific.
I think we'll do a disservice if we're not specific and we're not clear about what we desire.
Oh, I think
what
that's
we-
definitely what we're doing.
And I think I think it's excellent. I think the priorities that the cabinet have set out, the way Superintendent Manuel just described, the potential of what could happen in a year, I think that just needs to be made clear. And just as she said, then it's the city's responsibility to say, okay, in the pecking order with the firehouses and the police and everything else that they do have to consider. That's their responsibility. Ours is to advocate for our kids.
I think we're all in agreement that our role here is to advocate for our students, and as we've just gone through, that's what our superintendent and our board chair will be doing at the FAC meeting. For whether it's maintenance of effort, as well as our CIP requests.
And I'll make sure to clarify that projection in the future does not include additional projected costs for opening a new school. We'll that's the 1%
Yeah,
COLA
that's something.
Yeah.
figured out there.
Yeah.
But one of the things I want to make clear is we're all big girls here. We all know the politics. We all know about making relationships. And that's what it's all about. That is what it's all about.
I don't disagree, but I also think that what we can't lose sight of is that if we fear that it will damage a relationship because we have to advocate for our students, then that's just a bridge we have to cross.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I think we all know what I'm talking
Okay.
about.
Is there anything else on the budget?
I had just a quick question on the budget. So several of the salaries were righted due to ILA changes and things like that. Are we at the end of that? I know last year we had a couple that were increased pretty substantially. This year we have several that are.
Yeah,
Are we at the end of
Close.
that?
I
Are we
would say
gonna
that
see-
we're close.
Okay.
The exception being, one, Dr. Park, like we talked about during the meeting, she's going to try to cover 2 jobs at once
That's
with
right,
that
yes.
one position. So the CTE
The
position
position,
is
yes.
phasing out. I don't know if that's going to be possible with our current staffing, so know that that was a concern for us.
Okay,
We are currently under, still in shared services for transportation.
Right.
So there is a director, they have supervisors, they have routers, and we are paying a fee for using their bus lot in Collierville. So know that if we completely pulled off and did in-house for transportation, that would require additional staff to do routing. Mr. Blaine had also, in his request, talked about moving staff to specialist positions, so know that would be one of the things that he requested in his, if we
I
get
think
more
that's
money.
on the list.
That was on the
It's-
list.
yeah,
But we
it's on the-
discussed.
It's on the list of the thing. I just, when increases as large as 16, 17, 18% are shown in some of these positions, I think it's, perception can be difficult when we're talking about a 1% increase for our teachers. Writing that may be needed. I just don't want us to continue to have that in our, every year we have some people in the district office getting a 16%, 17% increase. I just don't think that.
I think we only had how many this year? One?
One.
One.
And it was because she was doing two jobs.
We had,
And still being
and the
paid less,
first, what's the front desk?
and still being paid below.
Yeah,
Well, that
front
one's
desk.
just an error. They never paid the front desk.
The
But
front
they
desk
can-
position
That's
is
still an
getting,
increase, but it's still an increase.
Yes.
Again, it's writing what
writing.
needs to be righted. And I'm
And it
I'm
sounds
not
like
saying
there's
that
not,
it's,
there's
I'm
not
not
a
saying
lot
it
of,
shouldn't be, I'm just saying, when you have those, when I was calculating out some of the increases, you just, and then we're trying to give a 2% to our teachers. So that's where my struggle is, and I just wanna make sure that this is not something every year we have multiple people that, in the district office that are receiving a substantially larger
Point
increase.
taken. Point taken. Okay, you have something to introduce to us that we're
Dr.
gonna put
Parker.
on the agenda? Can we do that for 9I? Do you wanna put
9H.
H? I thought we had a 9H. Oh, well, you already put it on there.
Sorry. She's ahead of things.
Okay.
gotta keep our eye on you.
We'll be running short of time, so I thought I'd go ahead and do
You're
it.
very smart, very smart.
Each year, we have the requirement for the state of Tennessee to submit an application for any special courses that we'd like to offer that are not included in the normal course code offerings for the state. And in the past, we have submitted several applications, and they received more than 1 year approval status. So we've had 5 over the course, or over the last 2 years that we've submitted. And just to give you an example, etymology is one, classical mythology, African American literature, facing history and ourselves. So those courses are half-credit courses. Everything except for facing history and ourselves was approved by the state for 6 years, so they won't come up for reapproval until 2023. Facing history and ourselves was approved for 3 years. It will come up again for approval for 2020. But the one course that we had submitted was Honors Humanity. That was approved on a 1-year basis, and the state has that option. They do 1 to 3 to 6 years for approval. So in order for us to continue to offer this course, which is a good course to show just all of the different historical culture and diverse cultural populations and perspectives across the world, this is something that we have to apply for. The due date is actually before the next board meeting, and so we needed to see if we could get this submitted to you for your approval for tonight.
John, so you can look, it is already posted, the attachment, so you can look at it real quick.
Okay.
Do y'all have any questions right now? We can always ask questions of Dr. Park
I
during
had
the
a
meeting.
couple of things for further business, just short little
Okay.
bitty things. Okay.
We're at that point.
Testing
Thank you,
began.
Dr. Park.
Testing began. This might be Dr. Park. How did that go?
not well.
That's what I was hearing rumors and things, and I didn't want to believe it until I heard it from your mouth.
So state testing did not start well with the online application system for the state, but they got it under control where we could log in, and our high school finished as they were expected
great.
to. All of
Okay,
our
good.
schools were able to move forward with testing as planned. So the state had that issue fixed with logging in pretty quickly, and they sent an email out to everybody to let them know you can continue. It didn't affect us because at the high school, we weren't planning to start immediately at 8 o'clock. And so we were able to get everything covered as needed today.
That's
With
great.
several hundred phone calls and text
Yes.
messages, but we still made it through. So
And that was
we're
a
good.
challenge for other districts who had to cancel their testing because they
Yes.
were starting earlier in the day, and they weren't moving, so they had to go back to their normal schedules.
Sure.
We moved slowly and deliberately in this process. We chose only for our high school to undergo the online testing for just this reason. And other districts were having to do middle school testing at the same time online. We were doing paper pencil. So know that was another challenge and the reason that other districts had to decide to pull the plug for today.
And while we're on the topic, I would
Yes.
like to give a huge thanks to our test coordinators at the building level, Diane Stovall in my office, John Pierce and Mason Grace. It's been a team effort to go through the online process. And so I want to thank everybody that's been very helpful to make it smoother for us.
Thank
Kudos,
you.
guys.
The other question I had come up was pre-K at the new elementary school. Is that something that is expected to start right off the bat?
Yes.
Okay, and then the walkout, that's high school 420, the walkout. I've had some questions from parents concerned about safety.
Yes, so
Has,
I'll take
yeah,
this one.
I'm.
So we have,
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
We have
Thank you,
coordinated
Doctor.
with the high school. They will, there will not be a dismissal as far as we won't say, okay, all students who want to walk out. We've actually heard from numbers of students who want to continue to stay in class and have lessons, and the teacher's going to continue teaching. We have worked with the administration at the school and also with the police department. They're going to have additional staff on campus to help with this walkout, and we'll have some locations chosen for those students who want to walk out with a defined time that they can walk out.
Thank you. That's
Great.
perfect. No, I think that's wonderful.
Yes, Ms.
Yes.
I'm just making sure you're talking about
The special ed pre-K, yes, the preschool, I'm sorry. I wrote down pre-K, I meant preschool, but yes. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, those are two different,
Got
yeah.
pre, and then it's just done.
Right, like it's in
Yeah,
a
exactly.
Is there
Right.
any
Yeah.
further
Right.
business?
Yeah, preschool, thank
Can
you.
you just remind us of the timing of the review and approval for the attendance zones?
As we didn't actually get to discuss that today, but what we discussed on the phone is that it will be part of our work session next month
So May, okay.
in May, but the vote will be taken in June is how
Okay.
it stands now.
So-
So it will be part of the work session in May and also again in June. But that will also give the community the time between our May 7th meeting, which is really quickly,
It
and then our
is, yeah.
June meeting. So they'll have a substantial time to be able to contact us as they need.
And we could just not, we just couldn't fit it into the schedule
Oh,
to
no,
do
no, no,
budget
this
and
is-
all
I
this.
cannot-
We
can
had
you
a
see?
lot
School
of-
zone
Yes, yeah.
today and
This
then
is a
do it,
lot.
vote on
No,
it in
this
May,
is a
so
lot.
no.
No, that's perfect,
Um,
that's perfect.
if
And that's not a
there's-
huge delay, I mean, that's gonna be fine.
Y'all,
as you
y'all
had
will
said.
still have your discussions and recommendations and,
Okay, okay, for you.
You're ready. If there's no further discussion, we're adjourned until 6:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Give everyone a minute to try to find a seat. Before we begin the meeting, if you are here to share remarks with the Board of Education, please be sure you turn in your request to speak to Ms. Subramani. Wave, Ms. Subramani. Turn it in to Ms. Subramani. Thank you. And with that, the meeting of the Germantown Municipal School Board Board of Education is now called to order. If you would all please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Ms. Fisher, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ms. Fisher. First order of business is the approval of the agenda. The agenda has been amended to add a new item 9H under approval items. The chair will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agenda as amended. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Roll call.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move right into what is always the highlight of our evening, and that is the recognition and awards. Superintendent Manuel. Mr. Haddow.
Good evening, everyone. I ditto what Ms. Landers just stated. This is like the highlight of HR's world. I think I said that maybe a month ago when we recognized the Teachers of the Year, but this is almost just as important, if not more important. The purpose of me being up here is to recognize those teachers that have received tenure for this school year. And that the audience is probably thinking, hey, what does tenure mean? Just a brief explanation. Tenure is an employment status with a cohort of teachers who have served in a capacity of over 5-year period, consecutive 5 years. And they have to perform at a certain threshold, and that threshold is a level 4 or a level 5, with 5 being the highest. So you could be a level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4 or level 5 teacher. The state defines a level 4 teacher as someone that has grown students in their academic life by advancing them a year past of what was expected. A level 5 teacher is someone that's grown a student by 2 years past of what they've expected. So they collect all this data on testing and high-stakes testing, if you will, on how students are performing. But I think more importantly, when I look at the audience tonight, I think maybe we're missing a critical piece, is that there's more to life as a student than just academics and academic growth. So if you look at the performance of people in here, I think there's choir and band and basketball. What a wonderful community to have people from all walks of life here to celebrate not only the teachers who have gotten to be a level 4 and level 5 with academics, but also those teachers and those students who have performed above and beyond in the classroom to make a community of learners more than a story of a number. So I think that looking back over a month, I think this night is the most important night for GMSD because it's a beautiful representation of who we are. If you ask what a teacher does and what they do and why they have value to a community, and it's really important that you hear this, they have to plan and they have to instruct and they have to assess. That doesn't sound like much, but if you just look at the instructional piece, there are 12 domains that principals go in to look at to see how teachers are doing. Do they state the standards and objectives? Do they have lesson plan transitions that are smooth? Do they know how to group students that are effective? Do they know how to motivate students? Do they know their students? Do they know their content? Do they know how to get to critical thinking? Those are about 6 or 7 that I just reeled off I imagine there's several more. Problem solving, questioning would be a couple others. But then if you look even beyond that, does that kid or does that student, if you will, feel welcome in that classroom environment? Are they respected? Is it positive? Is their work highlighted? Do they feel like they're a part of a group? And I think that the psychologists would use the term psychological safety. Do they feel safe under this person's leadership, that they can expose themselves and be vulnerable in their learning and their learning journey? So with no further ado, I do want to turn this eventually over to the principals so they can announce who these tenured teachers are. But I think at the heart of the matter, wow, what a great vocation to be a teacher. I do want to recognize, though, because I'm taking a little bit of a risk here, are there any parents of teachers that are up for tenure that are here in the audience to highlight what their child has done? If you'd be so kind to stand. I think it's wonderful that you have raised children to go into the vocation of teaching. I imagine there's a strong degree of human service in the household and empathy and adaptability and to care about your profession. Thank you for being here. On the other end, are there any children here that have parents who are being recognized as tenured teachers? If so, will the younger please raise your hand and or stand. To be a child of a teacher, hate to say it, but you're cooked. No, I'm joking. With no further ado, though, I do want to call the principals up to recognize the teachers that are up for tenure this year. And again, I thank you as a community for being here tonight. So Mr. Pekowski, Mr. Cherry, Ms. Price, Mr. Bond, and Ms. Diaz, please come on up. And we will do this by school order, so Ms. Price, Dogwood will go first, and then Farmington, and so forth.
Well, I couldn't be more excited to be here today to recognize these 6 teachers who've achieved tenure for Germantown Municipal Schools and at Dogwood Elementary School. They are definitely bright spots at Dogwood, and they do amazing things for students every single day. So with that being said, I'm going to start with 3rd grade, Miss Paige Boyce. Paige has been at Dogwood. Come on. She currently teaches ELA, and today was the first day of the writing assessment. So,
congratulations! Got a official DMSD badge. Come stand right here. Here, you can scoot on in. You can scoot on.
next up would be Rachel Burkado. She teaches 5th grade ELA and science. And Miss Burkado was originally left off my list, but we didn't forget her. Miss Laura Coleman. She teaches math and social studies. No, science. She is math and science. Miss Coleman and Miss Burkado were at Lakeland with me back in the day, so very glad to have them at Dogwood. Next up, Melinda Henson, teaching 5th grade math and science. Nope, social studies. We have one team that's a little bit wonky because we have people who love what they love. Miss Henson's been at Dogwood for how many years? 6 years now? No, 3 years. Trying to give her 3 years. Mr. Simons, Peter Simons, teaches music at Dogwood, and he is jack of all trades. He does a little bit of everything. Mr. Simons? And finally, we share Miss Ashley Smith with Farmington. She is our curriculum technology trainer.
It's okay.
Hello, I'm Liz Diaz, the principal at Houston Middle School, and I have 5 teachers that are making tenure. Only 2 were able to be here tonight, so let's start with Carrie Eldridge. She's my 6th grade science teacher. I call her my little mad scientist, our little Albert Einstein.
Slide on in. You can be next to her.
These are so awkward.
No idea. And next, I have Melissa Deskin. She's 8th grade ELA. And no, Joseph Bond cannot take her. Every time he sees me, he's already over there collaborating with his parents and saying, I'm going to take her. And no, you're not. She lives and eats ELA, and I want to tell this quick story. She's telling me on the way in, she says, oh, I was listening to Jeopardy, and I got the question right. The Jeopardy question was, what is an Andalusian or a Lipizzan? Does anybody know the answer to that? Horses. A horse! That's because we have a house system at Houston Middle.
All right, I am proud to announce our tenure recipients from Farmington Elementary. We will start with a 1st grade teacher, Corinne Darty. And we also have a kindergarten teacher receiving tenure, and that is Miss Leslie Morrow. And I didn't see him, but I may have missed him, but our professional school counselor, Jonathan Pritchett, is also receiving tenure.
I guess that makes sense. Houston High School is proud to recognize 6 teachers tonight. Unfortunately, 2 cannot be here, and I don't see another one, so we'll see. But the 2 cannot be here tonight are Sarita Bunsell and Krista Phillips. And at this time, I'd like to have Harold Randy Forrester come on forward. He's here also for basketball, too. I think our basketball team like to hear Randy. I know Liz poked fun at Joseph for stealing someone, but I am the master of stealing someone, and I stole this fine teacher, Miss Jessica Minton. A quick side note about Miss Minton, she just found out she is the TEA Distinguished Educator of the Year. So congratulations, Miss Minton. Our third teacher is Miss Amy Osment. There she is. And our fourth and final for the night is Miss Monica Thomas.
And it is my pleasure to announce the recipients of tenure at Riverdale School. Second grade teacher, Phoebe Earhart.
Congratulations. Here's your pen. Thank you. Slide in for a picture.
We have sped teacher, Christy Como. Sixth grade teacher, Tanya Dodson. Second grade teacher, Angela Robertson. And our orchestra and strings teacher, Stephen Short.
And we will have cake and have a little reception after we do all of our recognition for our recipients of tenure. Congratulations once again. Now let's move into some of our student accolades. Like Mr. Haddo said, this is one of those special moments, one of the things that makes what we do rewarding. And it's the fact that we excel in all areas, whether we're talking about in the classroom, with community service, whether we're playing an instrument, whether we're singing, whether we're performing on stage, whether we're on the field, whether we're on the court. And everything we do, we talk about being excellent in Germantown schools. And what these students here tonight have done is they have done just that. When you go out, when you represent us the way that you did, you make all of your teachers, your instructors, your parents thankful for what we've invested in you because you are using all of your talents to their fullest abilities. So with that, I'd like to move into some of our student recognitions. Houston High School basketball. We could not be more proud of our varsity women's basketball team this year. It was one of the most incredible record-breaking years at Houston High School. It is the first basketball team to make back-to-back trips to the championship in Houston's history, but also the first team to make it to the championship game. And they were named this year's state runner-up, or they won that award. This season was exciting. The team went undefeated in the district regular seasons, district championships, region championships, sectional championships, and tournaments, with an overall record of 56-10 across 2 seasons. Last year they made it to the Final Four, and this year they took second place at the state level as the first Memphis area municipality to make it to the big championship game. This team has a large number of very talented players, star players, and we're here to recognize the work that they've done, but also the dedicated coaches who helped forge this championship team, and the future just appears even brighter. So at this time, we would like the students to stand up as we call your name. And no, we can't fit you all up here at once, but after we do all of the awards, we're going to go into the lobby and we're going to get pictures with you and the school board and your coaches, so we'll have something to remember this by. So when I call your name, if you would please stand up and stay standing. Kelsey Trice, Jayla Hemingway, Madison Griggs, Melissa Carter, Daria Barnes, Destiny Wells, Zipporah Davis, Tatiana Gary, Annabelle Woodleaf, Kennedy Trice, Taylor Coleman, and Hannah Powell. And we'd also like to recognize their coaches, because the time they have invested in this team after hours in practices and ball games, and just the emotional effort that they've spent on this team is incredible. And that's another area where I think that these coaches have exuded excellence. I thank you for all the commitment that you have to these players, to these kids, because you're turning them into women. You're turning them into adults. And I said girls when I started. I apologize. You've turned them into women. So thank you for all of your work. So we'd like to recognize the coaches. Ben Moore. Randy Forrester. Kevin Weaver. Monica Thomas. And Megan Carudis. Thank you and congratulations. And once again, when we get out in the hall, don't stray away. We're going to get your picture when we get out in the hall. Now it's time to turn to our All West recognitions. Each year, musical education associations put on large performances to showcase all the great things that are happening with music education in West Tennessee. We call this All West for short. The most talented and rehearsed players are selected to participate in honor ensembles to work with guest conductors of great skill and prestige. This year, in our district, we placed 173 in All West choirs, bands, and orchestras. This is an increase from last year and a testament to the hard work of our music teachers and students. Tonight, the Germantown School Board of Education has the great pleasure of recognizing the following students. So once again, if you would please stand so we can applaud you. When we get out in the hall, we're going to take pictures with the board. For the River School Band, or Riverdale Elementary School Band, Cindy Liu. And stay standing, Amy Jackson. Alex Rivas. And Megana Balabdahadruni. Sorry. And their teacher, Mr. Brent Hopper. Congratulations. For Riverdale Elementary School's orchestra, Sun Young Ju. Andrew Chiang. And their teacher, Mr. Stephen Short.
Congratulations to Riverdale's orchestra students. And now moving on to Houston Middle School's choir. Karavi Garde and May Sistrunk. And their teacher, Mr. Zach Alverson, who couldn't be here tonight. Congratulations. And now to our biggest group. The Houston High School choir, all West members, and it had to go on to 2 sheets. That tells you how exceptional the choir was. So once again, if you would stand up and stay standing until we are done with everybody's names. Landry Benzing. Adalyn Boscuzzi. Paige Bowden. Grace Bird. Laree Carter. Katie Cotton. Jenna Christ. Pradenya Desikar. Morgan Eves. Brianna Elliott. Jack Emery. Cameron Gibson. Delaney Hay. Claire Harrington. Annie Hawley. Catherine Hoover. Allison House. Sarah Jordan. Jaden Lamb. Lathan Lamb. Nikki Lewis. Will Lowry. Grace McKinney. Ariel Mitchell. Rachel Mitchell. Joshua Moon. And we're going to pause here because I think we're getting silly. We can applaud all at the end if you all want, because I'm still halfway through the list and everybody's getting really tired of applauding. So we can. So Joshua Moon, Abigail Myers, Sunjuna Nair, Samuel Perry, Caroline Phillips Burke, Caroline Pillow, Adam Porter, William Royce, Emily Ryu, Reagan Shute, Carson Scott, Ellery Seymour, Vivian Skoda, Sarah Spain, Juliana Stanford, Taylor Stumpf, Drew Taylor, Diora Timivora, John Thomas, Faith Tidwell, Maddie Van Horn, Arbed Villalobos, Lauren Wages, Lydia Waldrop, and Morgan Williams. So now we can applaud for everybody. Once again, this is a special part of tonight because we're thankful for the teachers, the coaches, the parents who have really invested in these children, and once again for the children for how you're representing Germantown schools when you go out and perform and compete. So at this time, we'd like to take a quick recess so that we can go out in the hall to take some pictures, and then there's some cake out there, and then when we return, we'll start our business meeting.
We'll resume our board meeting after the wonderful festivities. Next on the agenda is the TLN update. Ms. Jones?
Thank you. Well, this session of the General Assembly is coming to a close. Really, the last big item on the agenda is the finalization of the budget. There are not anticipated any big surprises there, but it's just a matter of getting it through the General Assembly. This session was successful, even though it was short and there wasn't a whole lot of controversy. There was very successful in passing some long-term fixes, which benefit everyone, teachers, administrators, school boards. Some of the larger items I'll just key on was the funding of the RTI positions. It is the first time that there has been an amendment to the BEP to increase the recurring funding. Maybe not as much as we would have liked to have been, but it was a start, which is, I think, a good sign. There's also a moratorium on state testing that was passed. It prohibits the department and the State Board of Education from mandating assessments for any grades or subjects beyond those mandated in the 2016-2017 year until 2021-22 year. So that was a big accomplishment. Also, district data verification. It requires the Department of Education to create a process that provides districts at least 15 days to verify and correct assessment and accountability data. There were some issues in the past with some of this data coming out, so this 15-day grace period should benefit all districts to ensure that we have the accurate data. And then lastly, teacher licensure. There is teachers, principals, and school personnel, lots of different red tape that you have to go through to get your license, especially coming from different states. And so there were some changes made to really make that a little bit easier for us to certify teachers so that we can ensure that we have the best teachers, the best staff on hand. As I mentioned in my last report, the Department of Education reconvened its task force on TN Ready testing. The task force released its recommendations for the 2018-2019 school year last week, and the following are their recommendations. They eliminated the TN Ready chemistry end of course exam. Instead, the department will provide a chemistry test form as an option for any districts that would like to still include that test. They also eliminated the TN Ready English 3 end of course exam. Additionally, the department will prioritize a dual credit course for this as well, beginning in the 2019-2020. They also are collaborating with the Tennessee Board of Regents to use the TN U.S. History end of course exam as a dual credit exam, which will help students earn college credit from their TN Ready score. And in addition, next year the department will eliminate the standalone field tests for at least the next 2 years and reduce the TN Ready English Language Arts exam in 3rd and 4th grades to reduce it a combined 78 minutes. Again, maybe not as much as we would have wanted, but I think definitely a step in the right direction as the task force is moving forward. The task force is still convened. They will still be looking at things, but this was their recommendations for next year. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. There is no chairman's report this month. Next is a financial report. Mr. Jones.
Ending March 31, 2018. On the balance sheet in the school operating fund, we're reporting $22.2 million in assets. During the month of March, we collected $6.3 million in property tax revenue. That represents 40% of the total budgeted, and as a result, $6.5 million in cash was transferred to the local government investment pool for investing. In the Federal Projects Fund, we report a reimbursement due from the Tennessee Department of Education of $237,000. The Cafeteria Fund, total assets, liabilities, and fund balance of $231,000, with a net profit year-to-date of $51,000. Capital Projects, total assets, liabilities, and fund balance at $1.8 million. And the Health Insurance Fund, $2.2 million. The OPEB Trust, $2.4 million. And our fixed asset account group for plant, property, and equipment is at $71.3 million.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Superintendent's report.
As we discussed during our work session, I have the privilege of going before our Financial Advisory Commission tomorrow to talk about two purposes, our general budget, but also our capital improvement budget. And so I'd like to give the board at this time a highlight of the portion where I talk about our capital improvement budget. So just so the community is aware, in 2015, the Shelby County Commission funded a study for all the municipals, and that includes Shelby County Schools, to hire an architect firm to come in and prioritize the needs of the district. So, for example, which roof is older and needs to be repaired first, which HVAC systems are in a worse state of disrepair. We have had that list, and those are projects that we try to tackle every single year. Projects that don't get completed move to the next fiscal year. So know that this is a project we started back in 2015, and it's based on those priorities from Fleming's architect firm. But this is only our fourth year, and I think it's important for the community to not lose sight of what we have already accomplished. At all of our schools, we have made tremendous investments as a district and already made huge improvements. That doesn't mean we want to stay with status quo and be where we are, but know that we inherited $26 million in deferred maintenance, and we've already cut that almost in half. So huge changes as a district. So at Dogwood Elementary, we have invested over $1.8 million. That includes, and if you see at the bottom, the amounts that are in black and red. Black means it was one funding source, and red means that the money came from multiple funding sources. So we added modular classrooms because of our growth at Dogwood Elementary School. We've added a special education playground at Dogwood Elementary. We made minor upgrades to the front office, moving it so it was to a more secure place at the school. And we've also added a new energy management system and roof at Dogwood Elementary School. When we look at the funding for this, it came from multiple sources. GMSD, our district, contributed almost $600,000. Shelby County Commission contributed 31% at over $577,000. And with city bonds, they paid for $724,000 of that, 38% of the funding for those projects. Moving on to Farmington Elementary. They've had almost $1 million in upgrades in the past 4 years since we were created as a district. Once again, we had to add modular classrooms, over $310,000. We added one of our first projects. We added new windows to all the buildings that had huge savings in utilities because the original windows, the glass was brittle. There were gaps in the windows, so there was a huge improvement to the facility. We've made minor upgrades to the libraries, carpeting, exterior lighting, and the energy management system, and we've had a whole building-wide interior repainting at $122,000. The majority of that funding came from Germantown Municipal Schools. We're taking money out of our general fund to pay for this, and the other portion, 40%, came from the Shelby County Commission at $363, which was about 40%. At Houston Middle School, this was one of our newer schools, so it has the lowest amount of deferred maintenance, but we still have invested some capital there. So we had a repaving project out front that was over $114,000. We replaced the gym floor at $97,000, and we made minor upgrades, including library, carpeting, and water bottle filling stations at Houston Middle School. All that funding for those projects, $224,000, came from our general fund budget, Germantown Municipal Schools. Houston High, one of our largest campuses, but also has had the most invested in it. They've had over $4 million invested in Houston High School. So right off the bat, we had to convert an auto shop into a television studio, and so that cost $673,000. They've got a new HVAC system and roof at Houston High School. They've had minor upgrades to the cafeteria, paving, lighting repair, auditorium, and sidewalks. But then we also have a partnership where we've worked with private donors and parents to put in a turf field and a jumbotron. And then what was really driving that was they were losing their practice field under the lateral G, under the power lines, and they weren't going to have a place to practice. So the artificial turf allows a full-time practice surface for them. And how did the funding break down? 44% of that was from Germantown Municipal Schools, over $1 million. 22% was from the Shelby County Commission. We have our blue, which is the private donations. That's our partnership with sponsors and community members. That was over 19%. We do have city bonds that paid for some of these projects, which is 6% at Houston High School. But then there's also a term PEG funding, and it's a pass-through through the city. All people in the city who have cable, a portion of their bill goes to fund capital improvements in the local television studio that we have at Houston High School. So no, that's how it breaks down for the investment at Houston. Then we have Riverdale, which had one of our biggest projects. We've invested over $12 million at Riverdale's campus. So not only do we have the addition that was over $12 million, but we also did sidewalk additions around the campus. If you look at the funding, the majority of the funding for this project came from the city government, from the city of Germantown. They have invested over $7 million through bond proceeds. And Germantown Schools has also invested that. We've invested over $5 million to projects at Riverdale. When we look at our new elementary school, once again, we have $27 million, 85% from the city for this project, but Germantown Municipal Schools has invested over $4 million in this project. So that's about 15% of this project. So know that we have made substantial investments in our capital improvements across the district since we have been formed, and I don't want people to lose sight. I know that there are a lot of things that we want to fix and we want to do right, but know that we are making progress in improving our facilities in Germantown schools. So when we talk to when I talk to the FAC tomorrow, Chairman Ms. Landers, when she speaks to the FAC, we will be talking about our capital improvement list, and this was for fiscal year 18. We will not be able to accomplish all of these projects in fiscal year 18, but some of them have been approved and budgeted. So they will take place half in June, and then it'll roll over to fiscal year 19, but most of these were for this list. So those were those top 3 projects. Once again, the new elementary school, central office space, Farmington HVAC. We will begin those projects that have already been allocated and approved. But let's move on to other projects. The board has said, once again, they want to leverage partnerships with the community. And so there's a Houston High School field house that they've made a commitment that we're going to contribute for 5 years, $200,000, with a portion of that going to a field house and a portion going to fine arts. So now that's a commitment that they want the city to come on board and partner with us. There's also private donors involved in this process. And so the board said that that is a priority, a high priority for them, and that's something that we are encouraging the city to fund along with the school district and all of our community members. But our school board has also gotten together and said there are other projects that unless we have help from the city that we will not be able to complete this year. These are projects that would have to roll over into future years. The first, based on our current climate, the number 1 priority was for security upgrades at all schools. So we are looking at the entrances, we are looking at how students move throughout the school, we're looking at our video camera systems, we're looking at cell phone boosters. We've identified a lot of needs in our schools to really improve school security. So that was the first priority that we do not have funding for at this time, was for security upgrades for all schools. Second, and we always hear that this time of year, Riverdale is still on an old boiler and chiller system. On days and weeks where we have had fluctuating temperatures, it is not a pleasant experience to be in a classroom that is over 80 degrees in that classroom. And I know that the board receives emails, we receive emails at the district office. You can't switch back and forth from a boiler system to a chiller system. Once you switch it off, it stays off. And so as long as the temperatures are still getting in the 30s, we can't turn off the boiler. So know that that is a problem. And so this is one of those issues that the board identified as, excuse me, wanting to fix in our district, and that is money that we do not have to replace the Riverdale boiler chiller system. And finally, Dogwood ADA upgrades, specifically in our restrooms at Dogwood Elementary School, making those ADA accessible for adults that come into our building, making the larger stalls, and just making those bathrooms not look like they're from the 60s, but they're a more pleasant experience for students. So no, we have budgeted $600,000, but we know that that's just a drop in the bucket for ADA upgrades. Our board has said that these are the top 3 priorities, but that does not mean that the other issues on our CIP list are not priorities for the district. We are currently working with the city administration to try to find ways to have a 5-year plan that's not a wish list, that doesn't roll from one year to the next year. But we are really excited because this is the first time in working with the city administration that we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We see a way that they can fund all of these projects and work with us to accomplish all these goals. So know that this is something that's in the works, and we will have our capital improvement committee that Ms. Parker is the chairman on. We will meet again to talk about these projects. We meet regularly, and they present their work to the board in October. But know that this is an ongoing process that we're going to work with, getting all of these needs met with the city and with Shelby County Commission dollars, and also with our internal dollars that we have. And that concludes the superintendent's report. That is my portion on capital improvement that you'll hear us talking about with FAC. There's also the portion on general budget that we will also present tomorrow.
Thank you, Superintendent Manuel. Next item on our agenda is citizens to be heard. Citizens are asked to complete a card indicating their desire to address the Germantown Board of Education. Give the completed card to the executive secretary seated in the front of the room. Comments must be constructive. The school board will not entertain any disrespectful comments regarding elected officials. Citizens will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Time subject to change is determined by the chairman. We have 2 individuals this evening to come before the Board of Education. First is Mr. Brian Curry. Good evening, Mr. Curry. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Brian Curry, 9321 Hollow Creek Cove. Okay. I'd like to start out by thanking this board for the time and effort that you put in to make our schools the pride of the community. Recently, thanks to documents released by City Alderman, we learned that the city is planning to construct a 250,000-gallon water tower on the east side of the new school property. In fact, the city is going to require installation of infrastructure to support the water tower as part of a capital improvement project at a cost of over $200,000. A reasonable person can come to one of 2 conclusions, both of which should be concerning to this board. First, is the city making plans for the school site without any consultation from the administration or this board? Secondly, was there an agreement with the city for the purchase of this property in order to install a water tower? There was only a mention of the school site possibly being a good location for a water tower as part of the site search criteria. It was not included on any site drawings or any site plans. If it was known that this was the plan or there was an arrangement reached here, why wasn't it disclosed? How many meetings were held about this matter, and who made these decisions? One of our neighbors purchased their home adjacent to the school site in October of last year for $775,000. Another purchased their home around the same time for $890,000. They each reviewed the latest site plans before purchasing. There was no water tower, parkland, or any other use of the school property on any drawings. One even spoke to the city engineer, and he didn't mention a water tower at all. How do you think that these residents feel now? I ask how you would feel if you spent this kind of money only to learn something like this was planned for this property without full disclosure. I feel like the board owes it to these neighbors and to the rest of us in the area to find out what happened here. Unless you're that one resident from Texas who gets a sense of nostalgia with water towers, nobody in this room would want this in their backyard. Nobody. Why would someone think it would be okay here? What has happened with this proposed water tower is very troubling to the neighborhood, but this board has a chance to make it right. Ideally, when this issue comes up for discussion and a vote, you will side with your neighbors and not let the land go to the city for construction of a water tower. In closing, I would like to remind the administration and this board that you are moving into our neighborhood. Most of us feel that the school will be a good neighbor and an asset to the area. I will also remind you that there was very little opposition to the school site selection from our area. I do sincerely hope that efforts are made to be more transparent and forthcoming with us in the future and for us to work together to make this a great neighborhood school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Next speaker will be Mr. Wade Walker. Hello, Mr. Walker. Please state your full name and your address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Wade Walker, 9290 Hollow Creek Cove in Germantown. Our property backs up to the location of the new elementary school. Because of that, we were very involved in the process. We went through the site selections, we went through the proposals and the drawings, And we were excited and voted for the location that you ended up choosing. Those site plans did not include an administration building. They did not include a water tower. I think we were also promised 30 feet would be preserved, a green area along the property lines. The house on Forest Hill Irene, the first house in our neighborhood, looks like the property was cleared right to their property line. If I had known all this before voting, I probably would not have voted for that location. I would like to reiterate what Mr. Curry said. If this was known, it's disappointing that it wasn't disclosed initially. The changes that we are going through are a surprise, and living in a small community with such tight zoning requirements, it's kind of surprising that a water tower could be thrown in people's backyards. So I appreciate your time. I just wanted to let you know our opposition to the potential water tower. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. That concludes our citizens to be heard. Thank you both. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. On tonight's consent agenda would be the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, the annual review and revision of policies after second reading, and the annual policy review and revision after first reading. The chair will entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve all the items in the consent agenda.
Second. And the chair would like to add the tenure recommendations for spring 2018 as well. So the motion has been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Roll call, please.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
We move into board action items. 9A would be the Transportation RFP Award. A motion would be in order.
I move to approve the awarding of the RFP fiscal year 180020 to Durham School Services for bid alternate number 2 for a 3-year contract beginning August 1st, 2018, continuing through July 31st, 2021.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the awarding of RFP FY 180020 to Durham School Services for bid alternate number 2 for a 3-year contract beginning August the 1st, 2018, continuing through July 31st, 2021. Is there discussion?
I think we just might want to point out that there were only 2 bids received by our school district, and this one was the most reasonable financially.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Any other discussion?
I think just to point out something that Mr. Cathy had mentioned is that we have seen a steady increase in the service provided by Durham, and that we're hopeful that that will continue and even improve further.
Thank you. Roll call.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, maintenance contract extension.
I move to approve a 1-year contract extension with GCA Maintenance in the amount of $455,349.30, beginning July 1, 2018, continuing through June 30th, 2019.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve a 1-year contract extension with GCA Maintenance in the amount of $455,349.30, beginning July 1, 2018, and continuing through June 30, 2019. Is there discussion? Hearing no discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda, the bid award for Houston High School painting.
I move to approve the awarding of bid GMSD 2018-005 for Houston High School contract painting in the amount of $706,178 to Savage Brothers, Inc.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the awarding of bid GMSD 2018-005 for Houston High School contract painting in the amount of $706,178 to Savage Brothers Incorporated. Is there any discussion?
I think we might want to share. Mr. Cathy has done his research and knows that I think that 2006 was the last time that Houston High School, 2005, excuse me, I gave them a year. 2005 was the last time that Houston High School was painted. And also part of this amount includes the removal of a little over half of the lockers that are pretty much unused at this point by our students in order to increase hallway space, which is a safety issue when moving kids from one building to another. And if you've been in the halls of Houston High School during class changes, it's duck and cover if you don't know what you're doing. So this is not just a pretty facelift. This is a needed maintenance item and some safety issues addressed as well. So thank you, Mr. Cathy, for your work on this.
Further discussion?
Just one thing to also mention is that we only did receive one bid, given the size, and that it is going to be a very quick project, 7 weeks, and it's going to be pretty much round the clock. So I will thank everyone in advance because I know it will be a crazy summer.
As always.
Yes.
Seeing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, the bid award for Farmington ceiling tile and grid replacement.
I move to approve the awarding of bid GMSD 2018-006 for Farmington Elementary ceiling tile grid replacement, including the bid alternate for LED lighting replacement in the amount of $501,345 to A&B Construction Company.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the awarding of bid GMSD 2018-006 for Farmington Elementary ceiling tile and grid replacement, including the bid alternate for LED lighting replacement in the amount of $501,345 to A&B Construction Company. Is there discussion?
I just would like to maybe add that these ceiling tiles are the original ceiling tiles for the building. And I know it's not how we really want to spend our money. It's not exciting. But since they've been there since the beginning, new tiles will help with the air quality. There's mold, dust. Will also help with the sound. Mr. Cathy also shared with us that Mr. Pierce will be able to update the cabling in the school for a better internet connection. Farmington has not been updated since we've taken the schools over. And also we'll be updating the lighting, which in the end will help us save money, as well as save us costs in having somebody collect the fluorescent bulbs. So all around it is, like I said, it's not an exciting project, but it's one that will help us complete the update of Farmington, as we just painted the building as well last year. So it's just one more step in updating Farmington.
I think we also need to point out that I asked about how long these would last, and it's a 20-year warranty, and then we should expect that they should last 30 years. Now, not excluding the occasional need to replace as accidents and leaks and things happen, but this is not something we'll be coming back in 5 more years and need to do again. So I think that's important to know.
And just for everyone's information, in the beginning is 40 years ago. So the current ceiling tiles are 40 years old.
Yes.
So I think the district has gotten their money's worth.
And one thing I would just like to add that Mr. Cathy brought up, which I thought was very valid, is the fact that one of the things that our administration, especially within his department, really looks at the prioritization of these projects is what's going to have the most impact on our students. And he brought up some very valid points, which Mrs. Fisher mentioned, but just the fact that this will be a better environment within the classroom and within the school from the speed of the network. So I think everyone will feel something from this, and it's definitely warranted.
Any further?
I'd also like to thank Mr. Cathy for going out for bid again on this one. I know the last time it was a little over $700,000, and this time we're getting lights included for $501,000. So appreciate your effort on that.
Thank you, everyone. Roll call, please.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next for your consideration, the custodial contract extension.
I move to approve a one-year contract extension with American Facility Services in the amount of $660,000 beginning June 1st, 2018, continuing through May 31st, 2019.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve a one-year contract extension with American Facility Services in the amount of $660,000 beginning June 1, 2018, continuing through May 31, 2019. Is there discussion?
Yes, I'd just like to give some background on this. I don't want anyone to think that we are happy with the current services of this group. This is our third company in 4 years serving custodial services for us. We know that classrooms are missed, that people don't show up for work. The challenge we have is we'll get a new company and they'll have the same labor pool, so that's a problem. So we are looking at different approaches to try to accomplish this. We've priced doing it in-house. We've looked at a hybrid model where we may have one cleaning staff at each school that is a GMSD employee, so know that we're looking for solutions. We're also considering the fact that this was their first year as a startup in our district and in the state, so hopefully we will see some improvement, and if we don't, we will be moving on to something different.
Any further discussion? No. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, contract approval for Forest Hill Irene Road Improvements Project.
I move to approve the contract for sale and purchase of real estate and easement for the Forest Hill Irene Road Improvements Project.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the contract for sale and purchase of real estate and easements in the Forest Hill Irene Road Improvements Project. Is there discussion?
I will also clarify on this one. We are not transferring the land to the city. This is part of their process to create the new road on Forest Hill Irene. And so we talked about the terms of the contract, that at the conclusion of their building the road, this land stays in the possession of the school district. So we are not giving them the land along that frontage, but this is part of their construction process.
And that the land that we're talking about is only that's the frontage to Forest Hill Irene. It's not any other part of the parcel.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Oaf?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the first reading of the GMSD FY 2018-19 General Fund Budget.
So thank you, board, on the front of this.
I move to approve the GMSD fiscal year 2018-2019 general fund budget after first reading.
Second.
The motion has been made to approve the GMSD FY 2018-19 general fund budget after first reading. Superintendent Manuel.
The reason I'm thanking the board is not for their vote on this budget, it's the fact that they have seen this presentation now for the third time. And we also saw it earlier today. but I would like to highlight some of the key factors of this year's budget. First of all, I think it's important for everyone in the community to realize that this is not created in isolation. We talked to the administration at the schools. Each of the cabinet members looks at their programs, and it's a difficult process for us to complete. But also the fact that this year's budget document is different. If you look previously at our budget document, it was really just the numbers in each of the budget categories. The narratives, the pictures, the descriptions for the community to understand what's really happening in each budget, I think is important for everyone to understand how we spend our dollars. So I would like to thank Mr. Jones for his vision on this document, Ms. Crowder for her work on this document, and all of the cabinet members for their parts in the descriptive components of this document. With that, I think it's important for the community to also realize that we're not building a budget in isolation based on our current wants and needs. We do have a strategic vision for the district, and we have 5 goals of maximizing student potential, recruiting, developing, and retaining exemplary staff, mobilizing the community for the engagement of the system's benefit, and that's through the different committees, forums, the focus groups that we have in the district, establishing 21st century classrooms in schools, whether we're talking about technology, the lighting in the classrooms, and then the 5th goal is to work effectively and efficiently as a school board. But we are a public school system in the state of Tennessee, and so there are certain things we can and can't do, and we also have aligned our goals to mirror their goals. So what you'll see is that they actually fit in with each other. So when you look at the state goals, the first 3 really all fit under our goal of maximizing student potential. So when we're talking about early foundations in literacy, when we're talking about making sure that students are mastering English and math skills, especially by the time they get to 3rd grade, those are tied to the state's initiatives. When we're talking about high school post-secondary, and we're talking about our ACT average and our percentages of students that are going on to 2- and 4-year universities or going into the workforce, how are we preparing students for that next phase in life? And then all means all, whether we're talking about students with special needs who have barriers to learning, that we are doing everything in our power to remove those barriers so that they can be the most successful students that they can. Those are all part of maximizing student potential. When we talk about educator support, that's really our goal number 2, recruiting, developing, and retaining exemplary staff. All research shows that the most important factor in a student's life is the teacher in that classroom. And so if we can develop our teaching staff, if we can hire the best staff and keep those ones who are exceptional, then we are doing right by our students, we're doing right by our parents and our community. So know that that really is our second goal. And then finally, the state has the goal of district empowerment. And that's really our last 3 goals. What do we want to do around technology? What do we want to do about engaging our citizens and our stakeholders? And then how does our board work together with our funding bodies, with our legislators? How do we do all those things that make us a successful district? So no, those have all been put into this budget document, and those are all guiding principles for us. But the current reality of where we are. We are in the bottom 16% of funding in the state of Tennessee. And I know there's this perception out there that we are a wealthy municipality and that we have lots of funding. So I think it's important for the community to understand that we rank 123 out of 144 districts in the state in funding. So we are doing great things, but with little amounts of funding. We are doing more with less. Here's the more. Our board has really made strategic decisions around things that they say are important, whether we're staffing our nurses in our schools at a ratio of 1 to 1,000, where we have 6 in our district versus what we're funded for, 1 in 3,000. Or what our basic pay is for teachers in this new document, that our average salary is $58,000 versus the state's funding of $46,000. Or how many clerical we have in our schools, 16 that we're funded for versus the 26 that we have, so that our teachers aren't spending time trying to call parents during the class time to schedule their own IEP meetings. Or RTI coaches, district initiatives to really manage student data. How are we funding those positions at a cost of $375 annually that the state doesn't fund us for? Those are all important things that this board has said are priorities for us that we're going to do. And there's a long list. This is just scratching the surface of things we do around staffing. But then there are big district initiatives that we have also. We are investing $1.8 million out of our general fund for instruction into capital improvements. And hopefully you saw that in my superintendent's report when we were talking about what we've already invested in each of our schools. But then also, we are embarking on a blended learning initiative where we're spending over $600,000 annually, where all of our students in grades 6 through 12 have a device. And I don't think we can take that for granted. It is changing instruction in the classroom. And we talk about the lockers going away. Why are the lockers going away? Because they don't have to carry whole sets of textbooks anymore. The textbooks aren't outdated anymore. We can stay current with licenses. So no, that's all part of that blending learning initiative. But we're also fiscally conservative. We are fully funding our OPEB contribution, and that's other post-employment benefits. One of the benefits for our retirees is that they get to be on our health insurance plan. That's an unfunded liability in the fact that every year we have 15 teachers retire this year. Next year, 15 more teachers retire. Next year, 15 more retire. And the amount they're spending on health insurance is growing and growing and growing. We are funding that on the front end of this. This is what has bankrupted cities when you talk about benefits like Detroit, where they went bankrupt because they weren't fully funding their pension plans. But know that this is something that our board is making that fiscally sound decision to do that. And then finally, later start times. This board said that removing barriers for student health was a priority for them. And so moving from a 3-tier to a 2-tier bus system costs us about $300,000 annually. And that's a commitment that they have made to fund that. But know that even in light of the fact that we're in the bottom 16% of funding, we're doing all of these incredible things for students. Part of our challenge is to also be aware of the coming issues or concerns financially that we have for a district. The first is that we received all the money that the city could give us based on their bonding capacity. We received $27 million for the new elementary school. And know that the building at that time was priced at $165 a square foot. That is not the current rate for construction in the city, so know that we're predicting it's going to cost more to build that new elementary school based on current construction costs. Then also, just running the new elementary school. We can't move all the staff from our existing schools to that school and it run the same way. You have to have a new principal, assistant principals, librarians, counselors, textbooks, library books. All those things that go into running a school, we are predicting that that's going to have an increased cost of at least $2.8 million a year in our general budget. So know that that's something that we're going to have to plan for and be aware of once we open that new school that we currently aren't funded for. So know that that is a challenge for us. Our board has also talked about moving away from the state's maximum capacity to a richer student-teacher ratio. And so we've done an initial analysis to calculate how many teachers it would take to reduce the numbers just by 2 students. So if the state sets a maximum of a 1-to-20 ratio, 1 teacher for 20 students in the K through 3 grade band, we would have it where we would at least be at a 1-to-18 ratio. But know that comes with a significant cost. So at the high school, we're already well below the state's maximum. We have a 1-to-20 ratio for staffing at the high school. At Houston Middle School 7-8, we have a 1 teacher for every 25.9 students, so we wouldn't have to add additional staff to move to optimal capacity. But in our other schools, we would have to add additional staffing. So I won't read through all of them, but Houston Middle School 6th grade grade band, for example, we would have to add 1 teacher to move them to optimal capacity at a cost of $75,000. And that's using the average teacher salary of $58,000 plus all their benefits included in that. So know that it costs the district more than just the $58,000. So you can see at all of our districts it would take substantial funding at a total cost of $1.2 million, and that's just a prediction right now. Once we open the new elementary school, it could be more than that to move to optimal capacities. And then also, this board has talked about our middle school concerns and the fact that if we have a complete build out of the city, we will be beyond our optimal capacity for middle school population. So no, that's a future funding concern that we have as a district and something that we're trying to plan for. So all this put into a big picture. I know it's kind of gloom and doom, and it's a challenge, but I think it's important for people to understand why we can't fund all the initiatives and all the things that we would want to have. Know that there really are some challenges for us as a district. So with that, I'd like to go into the overview of the budget, our revenue streams, and how we're funded. We are funded through BEP, that's the Basic Education Program, and that most of our funding comes from the State Department of Education, and that's approximately $27 million. The second largest funding source for the school district is that we receive over $23 million in county taxes, and that's on an ADA share. So it's how many students, along with the attendance rate that we have in all of our schools. And so at the end of the year, there's a settling up with the other districts based on how often your kids came to school. But then our other biggest funding source is through the city of Germantown, and they fund us at $2.4 million. So I know that there was some conversation about how can the city continue to fund our schools. Realize that the majority of our funding does not come through from the city. It comes from the state and our Shelby County funding sources. So this is a list of the general fund expenditures. I'll not go into this whole list because we're going to do it by department. With student services, their budget is over $2 million. Know that the biggest highlight or change in their budget was that they have some increases in security cameras at our school levels based on our assessments. That doesn't scratch the surface of what we need for student safety and security. It's just a start to get to a more safe environment with cameras. When we look at our Department of Operations, once again, based on our current funding realities and the big challenges we have for the district, all of the cabinet members were challenged with creating a budget neutral budget. They were supposed to not have any increased positions. So in the Department of Operations, there was a shared service position where there was a man in Arlington that we were paying, along with the Arlington School District, that was managing our HVAC systems. Every morning he would get up and look at the output and input of all the systems. He would diagnose problems, and even before the students and teachers came to school, he would have work crews going to the schools to repair those. That's no longer an option for us to share. So Mr. Cathy has taken the money that we were paying to Arlington, and he's reduced a different area of his budget to add that position and be able to still provide that same service. You'll see the construction of the new elementary school is a big increase in this budget, and there's also a reduction in transportation payments to Collierville at $175,000. So we're no longer paying the penalty for changing our start times. Other changes. We have built into our budget a 1% increase for all staff. That is not where I want this budget to end, but we don't have our increases in all of our revenue yet. So as we increase all of our revenues, it would be my request to the board to consider giving the other 1%, and that would be a cost of about $344,000 on top of what we have, so that all of our staff can have a 2% increase. That is part of the governor's goal in increasing funding for school districts, and I think we need to mirror that. When we talk about the Department of, this also includes partial salaries for the new school administration that we've previously discussed. With the Department of Finance, you'll see a reduction in the cafeteria costs. This is something I think that our board needs to take pride in. When we started a district, we had a $300,000 loss in our cafeterias because we don't receive the supplemental funding because we have so few free and reduced students in the district. They made the decision at that time to become the only second district in the state of Tennessee to outsource nutrition services to Aramark Food Services. And since that time, we have dramatically reduced it by over $226,000 a year, where we're not supplementing the cafeteria account. It is a self-sustaining account. So no, for us, we are predicting that this year and next year that will be a zero amount, that we won't have to transfer any funds, but we're still budgeting just in case sales change from year to year. But no, that is something that this board needs to take pride in, that we made that decision. In our Department of Technology, another budget neutral position. Since we are fully going to be embarked on the one-to-one initiative, we're adding over 1,880 devices. They have requested to add a position in their department using the funding from those, the insurance costs for those initial devices. They have also added money in their budgets for safety software and security cameras in their budget. Just so you can see how this has changed over time. Pre-GMSD, we were looking at 2,000 devices in the district. That includes teachers and students. Next year, we will be over 7,700 devices, and we have moved from 1.7 staff to 10 staff to serve those computers. The ratio is still not good. We went from a ratio of one person to fix the 1,200 devices to a ratio of about 780, but no, for us, it's a step in the right direction. And we will be only one of, in the top 15% of districts in the state of Tennessee that have a true one-to-one initiative. With the Department of Exceptional Children, this would be the one department that was not budget neutral. Know that when we look at students with special needs, we are really driven by their needs and the IEP meetings and the IEP team and what they decide is best for students. And so know that based on our current needs and our student population, there are several things where we would be out of compliance. We would not be able to meet the students' needs unless we have additional staffing. So we are seeing, in this budget, you'll see 2 special education assistants added to Dogwood and preschool. We have 1 speech pathologist because our current speech pathologist cannot meet all the needs of the district and all the students. And if you think about the IEP meetings that they have to attend, the direct services that they have to have in instruction and students, we cannot currently meet the needs that we have. There's a request for a sped specialist to serve the middle and high school because once again, the specialists have to sit in those IEP meetings and serve students, and sometimes those meetings will last 6-7 hours for multiple days. So know that with 2 people serving all of our schools, it has been a challenge for those special education specialists. We also have an additional psychologist. We were outsourcing some of this and also using student interns to meet the needs of our students. Once again, they were falling behind on their assessments of new students and also serving our students. So that was a challenge, and that's why you see this in this budget. And then finally, a BCBA for students that have emotional issues and outbursts in class. These individuals are boots on the ground that work with the teachers and the students in the classrooms. So know that all of these were based out of needs in the school district. With the Department of Academic Education, there is a required increase for the state's retirement system. So they require us to move from funding 9.08% of their retirement to 10.46. That was over a $400,000 change in our budget. So know that that was a required change. We have to pay more for their retirement. We've also added 5 teaching positions that aren't allocated to schools yet, and we always do that based upon the growth that we see in the district. So as we see more students, we add 5 teaching positions. With the superintendent's office, there are very few changes. We added an increase in salary to the front desk clerical. She was a 12-month and was getting paid less than the 10.5-month clerical that were currently in the schools. So we made her salary aligned to the front desk receptionist at the schools. And then finally, with our Board of Education, we have another area that we really need to shout from the rooftops. The fact that they are fully funding our required contribution for OPEB means that future boards, future districts won't have a contribution that moves to $7-8 million. We are paying for it on the front end. So know that that takes away out of our general fund, but know that's something that the board needs to be proud of that we're funding every year annually. And then finally, when we talk about our competitive teacher salaries, the reason that we built in a 1% and that I would request an additional percent to get to 2% is that we currently aren't on par with the other municipal districts or schools systems in the area. So even though we have a better health insurance plan and it costs a lot less, and we haven't had a health insurance increase, and it will be once again for 4 years, we haven't increased their health insurance, and that's not typical in the health insurance market. We are paying less for starting teachers. So know that in Germantown, we were paying $42,343 at step 0 for a teacher. After the 1%, it'll move to $42,766. And know that if we provide a 2% increase, it would become $43,190, which would be even with the other municipal school districts because they've already provided those increases. Just to put this in perspective, taking out benefits for these teachers, they're making $2,600 a month take home, and that's a challenge. This board has previously looked at Thornwood apartments, which are proposed. Our teachers couldn't even live in those apartments based on the 2-bedroom rent. So know that this is difficult, and so know that even though it may not seem like a lot of money, it is to these teachers. Now that comes to our unfunded request. We created a balanced budget as we're required to do by law, but I think it's important for the community to realize that, and the cabinet members to realize that we know there are other needs in the district that we have that are currently unfunded, and so we have a list of those. So like I said, the additional 1% COLA for staff, security camera upgrades, additional supervisors and instructional coaches, STEM lab upgrades, foreign language teachers at the elementary school, improving our Houston High School's circulation library. Moving to a hybrid model like we talked about for custodial, to have those people who work for Germantown schools and really serve us. Adding sped paraprofessionals, adding consulting teachers for private school liaison, increasing our nurses' pay and moving them from 7 to 8 hours. adding more work to the student services department, moving clerical positions to specialist position, and then having a safe school specialist who's just in charge of drills, analysis of safety and security at our school, and making sure that we're not just compliant, but being proactive in keeping our students and teachers safe. And so those are our unfunded requests. And I would like to end with, it is a challenging time for the district when we create budgets, and it always is painful for the staff to talk about the things that we want that we can't afford. But I think it's important that we have a district highlights page on our webpage for parents. There's a link that shows all the things. We keep it updated that we have done, and this is just our 4th year as a school district. So knowing that we have cut our deferred maintenance, that we have made all those improvements to the campuses, that we've added orchestra programs at our elementary school, that we've added RTI coaches, that we've added job coaches for special education. I can't read all the list, but I think it's important to say we are doing incredible things as a school district. We want to continue doing those incredible things, but know that we do have limited funds, and it's a difficult challenge for this board. And with that, that concludes my overview of our budget process. Thank you for bearing through that for a 3rd time.
Yes, I'd like to thank the superintendent and Mr. Jones, our CFO, and all the staff for all the hard work they did in putting the budget together. This is just the first reading of the budget, and I want everybody to understand, because sometimes in July people go, how come you're changing the budget? We don't receive the final figures that we receive from the county and state until July often, so things will change. This year's budget, a big portion of our funds are going towards human resources, towards a 1% increase for our teachers, with the hopes that some of this funding will change and we'll be able to give them a 2%. It's important as a district that we support and recognize our teachers for their skill sets that they share with our students on a day-to-day basis. The teachers are our most important commodity. Another important addition to our budget this year is a behavior specialist as well as a psychologist. They are there to work with our behavior and emotionally disturbed students, and I think this is a very crucial component in our budget this year, that we address mental health of our students. And I think one last thing I want to say I'm always excited about is I want to thank the district staff and our previous board that made the decision to take that out-of-box decision for the cafeteria, where we were losing the first year over $300,000, and made that decision to step out and hire Airmark to come in, and I believe this year will finally be towards a self-sustaining budget, which I think is really exciting. So thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, I'd like to echo what Ms. Fisher said, the outstanding work by the district office and our superintendent and Mr. Jones getting this document together, this budget together, but not just that, also looking at what our needs or what our wants are beyond that. I think it paints a picture of how hard you're working to provide excellent education to our kids on a budget that is tight, but how much more we can do if we have additional help on the funding side. So I find that to be not depressing, but challenging and encouraging that now we need to do our job and build relationships and see how we can move forward in the future, because what we want is excellence always, not just this year, not just next year, but always. And this is that step in that direction. So thank you to all of you. Further discussion?
Yes, I would like to chime in. I cannot thank the cabinet, district staff, the superintendent enough for the time and energy. I would dare say that this might have been the hardest budget season to date because of the difficult decisions that our staff had to make to get this budget balanced. We are, if you take out the amount of money that we're spending on our capital outlays, we're pretty much even expense-wise year to year. And that includes a growth in students that we're projecting. And that's not easy to do with the level of service that we provide and what we provide for our students. And I'm going to thank the superintendent and our chairman in advance for the strong message that will be delivered tomorrow to the FAC, saying that we did all we could this year to get us balanced, but we still have a long list of items that are not pie in the sky. They are just good adds, and in some areas needs, safety, specifically mental health, that if we could have additional funding this year, we could definitely use that. And I don't want to be doom and gloom, but that's typically an accountant's role. Sorry, Mr. Jones, but is to say that when you look at the slides that the superintendent showed us, we are facing an increase, a need of additional expenses of over $2.8 million next year when we open the doors of our school. I'm sorry, in 2019. And that is not going to come from the state. That's not going to come from the county. We will have some of that, but we are not increasing that significantly. And so we're going to have those hard conversations with our funding body about how do we sustain excellence when we've taken our budget to the quick. So I thank you in advance for being our executive committee to deliver that message, because it's not an easy message when you are in the midst of budget. But it is our role as the school board to advocate for our students and for our children. And it is the city's role to decide where the money needs to be spent. So all we can do is ask. And I appreciate the document that you prepared that does that so well. Thank you.
I think we could go back and forth all night thanking you all, and it still wouldn't be enough.
No, not at all.
But I think as a whole, this board is very grateful to each and every one of you for the part you played in producing the budget for the coming school year. Excellent work.
Yes.
And as I told Mr. Jones today, in all the years of all the budgets, it's the most elegant budget I'd ever seen. So the presentation is amazing. And thank you, Ms. Crowder, for your part you played. And with that, is there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Hoff?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Final item on our agenda tonight is the approval of the special course application GMSD Humanities 2018-2019.
I move to approve the special course application for GMSD Humanities 2018-19.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to approve the special course application GMSD Humanities 2018-2019. Is there discussion?
None.
Was the second from Ms. Parker or Ms. Hoff? I would like to clarify.
It was a tie.
Take your pick.
Either one of us will work.
Flip a coin. Is there discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Hoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Chairman Landers?
Yes.
Thank you.
We will conclude the meeting tonight with announcements. May is a very busy month in the school business, so this covers the entire month. May 1st will be the groundbreaking ceremony for our new school. It will be at 4 p.m. May 7th will be our next board session, work session, and board meeting. May 17th is the Houston High School graduation at Bellevue Baptist Church. May the 22nd will be Leadership Germantown's ribbon cutting for the greenhouse at Houston High School, and it will be at 5:30. Registration for our new students began today, and registration for current students begins on June the 4th. All very important dates. As always, you're encouraged to check out the GMSD website for more information on any and all of these dates and occurrences. Is there anything else to come before? Ms. Jones?
Well, Superintendent had some.
Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, we have a very important bid opening for the new elementary school. So let's hope that everybody, that is a productive time and we come in with good competitive bids for the new elementary school.
Also,
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we will also need, after that, to have a special called meeting to approve that bid so they can start the construction process.
Chairman, Lisa, Ms. Parker and I will be attending the school safety conference tomorrow, Wednesday in Nashville for TSBA, and I would ask that we might have time after we return to share what we find out with the board.
Definitely, we will make sure that's on the May 7th agenda.
Thank you.
For you and Ms. Parker to report. We appreciate very much you representing the board as Ms. Jones, Ms. Fisher, and I will be here to represent the board at the FAC meeting tomorrow evening. So safe travels to you, and we look forward to your report. Is there anything else?
One thing, it's not in May, it's one last thing in April, is the color run for GMSD is on Sunday, April 29th, and if you have not registered, please register. It's a lot of fun. Festival, you don't even have to run, just walk. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
Okay. That concludes this evening's meeting, and we stand adjourned.